as you roll.
Hold on, I got something coming. It's saying preparing to stream the live meeting. But this is, I told it to go to Facebook to begin with. Yeah, see, for some reason, I think Restream is just sending it to YouTube, even though I told it to go to both YouTube and Facebook. It's supposed to go to both.
Well, software very occasionally decides it doesn't want to do what you want it to do.
We could just make a Facebook post saying, join us on YouTube.
There you go.
Yeah, can you do that?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Good idea.
Of course, it's a good idea.
What are you doing now?
Averting my eyes, oh Lord.
Averting my eyes. Well, don't. We're getting there little by little. Anybody who is watching on YouTube, hi. I'm a guest. A guest speaker.
Sorry,
oh, it has
folks.
my full name on my thing.
All right, so I've got it up on YouTube on my computer here. Once
Cool.
again, we are live. All right.
Hey.
All right, well, let's just get right into this. And,
Sorry, I was just trying to say something to the watchers while you were fiddling.
That's weird. Okay, hold
so
on.
they wouldn't turn it off.
Oh, Bill, Bill,
Yes.
you posted about. Oh no, never mind. Forget it. That was from a while ago. Don't mind me. I'm just nutty these days. All
Okay.
All right. It's all good.
I posted the link to our YouTube broadcast on the Fright Lounge Facebook page. So
All
we
right.
should be okay.
All right, cool. Thank you for that, sir.
Oh, and there we are. It's actually showing it on the page.
Hey.
What, on Facebook?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. If they go and click it, they'll see the live video and be
Oh,
able to
okay.
join us. So
Oh, awesome.
voila.
All right, perfect. Well, folks,
Technical
What are these-
technical issues.
yeah, one of
Hi.
these days we'll work out the technical issues. I, of course, well, first of all, welcome to episode 5 of Horror Lounge, the show in which the best horrorologists in town will discuss horror in depth and get a conversation going for seasoned horror viewers, as well as helping newbies to the horror genre. I am Rigor from Then Is Now podcast and the East Meets the West podcast.
I'm Bill Van Ryn from Fanzine Drive-In Asylum and Facebook page Groovy Doom.
And
Awesome.
I'm Michael, or you could pronounce it as My Kill, since we're talking about killing. Old friend of Rhaegor's, like old friend.
Old?
Old. I mean, we've
200
known each
years.
other for like decade, like since we were 12 or 11. So yeah, it's like 40, almost 40 years. I think we've known each other.
Well, glad to have you, Michael.
Michael,
Michael.
I don't care. Michael, Michael.
We also have another guest that's going to be joining us. He's going to be late. It's frequent Then Is Now special guest co-host Spency, who was with Bill and I on episode 1.
Why is he going to be late? What's his excuse?
He works till 8. So
Oh, there's that. Oh, actual work. Okay.
That's a good excuse.
I know, for a 21-year-old to actually work, that's
I know, right?
Yeah. You want that.
And complete his whole shift.
yeah. So glad to have you, Mike. Mike is a newcomer to any of my shows, so
Yes.
I'm so excited to have you here. And I do have to apologize to you too. I fucked up. Well, I don't know if we're supposed to swear on live streaming.
I was going
We
to ask
do.
you that. Like, can we?
We do all the time. Nothing ever happened to us.
Oh, fuck it then. Let's do it.
All right. Keep it real.
So the week before last, leading up to that, I was transitioning, as some of you guys may remember from last episode, I was transitioning from my old job into my new career. And then last week, my wife went to California with some friends for the whole week. And when she's not around, I get confused. So I was talking with Mike, and we came up with the idea that he'd come on the show with us and we would talk about the Halloween franchise. And of course, as soon as we finished that conversation, I completely forgot. And then I was
So
talking.
we were going to talk about John Carpenter.
John Carpenter films. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to Spencer the other day, and I'm like, shit, we need a guest for this coming week. I don't have one lined up because, I'm like nutsy cuckoo. And So he came up with the concept of why don't we do like slasher franchises and we'll stick it to the main three or the big three: Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween. I'm like, yeah, great idea. So then Friday comes along and Mike texts me and says, hey man, so we on for John Carpenter on Sunday? And I was like, oh fuck. But it all works out because Mike, you love these movies anyway. So
Yeah, it's all good.
we'll do John Carpenter on another Sunday, and I'll actually write it down this time so I won't
It all
forget.
comes out in the wash. Right, I'll write it down. Yeah, wives tend to be very good about organizing things, and when they're around, that aura of organization permeates. But when they're not there, yeah, it's you get lost, confused.
Yeah. I'm like the tick when Arthur's not there. When you're not here, I'm confused. So of course my notes just sort of flaked out on me, but wait,
Friday the 13th, Nightmare on
Yeah,
Elm Street, and the
right.
Halloween.
yes, we are rife with
Yes.
technical issues today. I'm not 100% sure why.
Rife.
There we go. Here's the word for the week is rife. So before we get into this, I want to show you guys actually, Bill, this is mainly for your enjoyment. My wife's cousin's husband was in a bookstore a month or two ago, and he saw a book that he thought I would like, texted me, said, hey, do you want me to buy this for you? I said, sure, I would love it. And so I Venmoed him and blah, blah, blah. So I got the book, and it is this thing. It's a huge, thick, hardbound book called Ad Nauseum.
Yeah,
And it's what we do. Have you familiar with this at all, Bill?
I am familiar with it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was written by Michael Gingold, who was a former editor of Fangoria magazine.
Oh, nice. I don't know if people can see it.
Yeah.
Basically, it's
Wow.
a collection of newspaper movie ads, which is kind of funny because I had been toying with the idea of doing a book like this. Oops, that's kind of too big. You can't really see that one.
There's a demon face there. I saw it.
My mic just cut. Every time I bump the microphone, it keeps cutting out. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael phone.
Oh, wow.
It's got stuff like this, new cool newspaper ads.
That's
So
awesome.
I highly recommend it if you can find it. I mean, he happened to find it, used in this bookstore. I think it was like $30, and I freaking love it. It's
Big, thick
Bill,
phone.
it's right up our alley.
I've been doing a
absolutely-
fanzine. I've
Oh,
been
sorry,
doing
go
a fanzine of that called Drive-In Asylum, where it's mostly old newspaper ads, collage form, back on paper, the way you remember seeing them when you were a kid. And that had been one of the things that had been tossing around, was doing a book like that. And then all of a sudden, all over Entertainment Weekly, Michael Gingold has a book of movie newspaper ads coming out, and it's called Ad Nauseum. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'll put my book on the back burner.
That's funny.
I swear
I've been
there's
trying-
a certain number of ideas floating around in the ether, and like multiple people get them, and then
It's funny how that happens too,
Yeah.
especially when they see things you did and get inspired to do something just like it.
yeah. I know you should probably feel complimented by that, but at the same time, that's like revenue you
I
could have made.
didn't.
Oh, you
I
didn't
didn't feel complimented by it. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Bill's
wow.
magazine is awesome, Mike. If you get a chance to check it out, I actually wrote an article for it at the end of last year, I think, right, Bill? It was about the
Yeah.
50th anniversary of Dr. Phibes.
Yeah,
And-
that's well, I guess that's the only time you've been in it so far. Hopefully you'll have something for us again in the future, right?
Oh, definitely. I've got a couple ideas cooking, and now that I write for a living, it's easier for
That's
me
right.
to get things like that done. So,
Sweet.
and I just wanted to mention too, over on Dennis Now, I'm going to give a quick self promotion here, because our 100th episode is coming up, and we're actually going to have William Goldstein and his son Damon Goldstein on the show again. And William Goldstein is the guy who created and wrote the original Dr. Phibes, and he's subsequently written several sequel novels, and they're working on a third film. They've announced that Malcolm McDowell is attached to play Phibes. So it's
Sweet.
really cool. All right, so let's get into this because we've killed enough time with.
I was going to say about the cover to the book that since we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, among other things, that the fact that that original poster with the claws spiking out and the girl in the bed with her eyes open, and that I've always loved that poster design. And as soon as you showed the cover to the book, I was like, oh, because I love that.
Yeah, I love
It
that.
kind of brings you right back there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
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 Mike, I think we even saw that together in the movies, didn't we?
The first one,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not sure.
Well,
I kind of feel like I
it
saw
was
the
rated
first
R
one on
in
video,
92.
and then I saw the sequels in the theater.
Okay.
But I don't
know
know.
it's in the theater, but I must have seen it with my parents because it was rated R. So,
Well, that didn't stop them from taking you when you were like 4.
Here's my magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Since we gave some screen time to Michael Gingold's book, we can give some screen time to mine.
Drive-In
Yes.
Asylum.
This is actually the 6th special that we've done so far, and we're up to our 23rd volume of the regular issue. And if you can see on the inside, like I make it very retro looking. It looks like an actual newspaper, or at least I hope it does, because that's what I'm going for. We have a lot of people that contribute, and they write articles and reviews, and we actually have original content. It's not reprint our interviews, our written content anyway. The interviews are brand new. They're people that we actually spoke to, believe it or not, when somebody had, an interview lying around with somebody and they wanted to get it printed somewhere. That's where a lot of my stuff comes from. But most of it is also just brand new. Like the contributors actually spoke to these actors and actresses and directors. We've got a great feature coming up in the next issue. There's a really rare film from 1972 called Scream Bloody Murder. And it's not the one that you may have seen about the kid who has a hook for a hand. It's a totally different movie about a kid who lives in a house with his sister, this big spooky mansion with his sister, and he sleeps with mannequins. And that's only like the beginning of his problems.
Oh my God, that's creepy.
And I got the director, Bob Emery, Robert J. Emery, who also directed a whole bunch of other movies out of Tampa, Florida, including Ghetto Freaks and a movie called The Florida Connection. He's a great guy. He talked to me about Scream Bloody Murder, which is exciting. And I also got in touch with the lead actress in the film, Marlena Lustig. So I have a full-blown Scream Bloody Murder feature coming out, and I'm very excited about it.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so
End
cool.
of rant.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And where can people get your magazine, Bill?
You can go to our Etsy shop. It's called Groovy Doom. Or just go to driveinasylum.com and there'll be links to where you can buy the issues. If you're watching this in the UK, there's a local UK distributor called Strange Vice. They're an online service, but if you order from the UK, your postage is going to be a lot cheaper if you get it from Strange Vice. Also, if you're in New York City, you can pick it up in Forbidden Planet. We're stocked on the shelves there. And they usually have all of our issues in stock, up starting with issue number 8. Everything prior to number 8 is sold out and discontinued.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Limited run.
I love it. It's so good. All right, so let's get into the origin of slasher movies. Now, I went to Wikipedia, as you know, encyclopedia by general consensus, and they had a source at the beginning that I actually couldn't verify it. However, it does say this, and I think it rings true. A slasher film is a genre of horror films involving a killer stalking and murdering a group of people, usually by use of bladed tools. And they go on to say that it's been sometimes used for any horror movie with murder involved, but the slasher has certain characteristics which set it apart from other kinds of horror films like splatter films or psychological horror films. And some of these characteristics are what is known as the final girl. The killer is generally the protagonist, teenagers engaging in sex and then they get killed. Sometimes it's in remote locations. Can you guys think of any other tropes that set slasher movies apart?
The killer is generally somewhat indestructible.
Yep.
Or like, I guess maybe that's common in a lot of horror movies, but pretty much anytime they think he's gone or they've done away with him is
Every
Well,
time I try and make a definition of something like a slasher film, I always get it wrong and someone complains, "So that's not a slasher film, man."
yeah.
So I'm afraid.
What about this one that doesn't follow those criteria?
Yeah, and a lot of these, especially these horror subgenres, are loose, with the descriptions. Like, I
Yeah.
had a guy on about talking about exploitation films, and it was you can't define an exploitation film 100%. There
Yeah.
are certain characteristics that may make it an exploitation film, but it's kind of vague sometimes.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really broad term because you're not even talking about the content of the film when you say an exploitation film. That could be a big mistake to define what an exploitation film. A film is an exploitation film simply if it's made in the spirit of wanting to make money off of any subject that it might be about, something that's hot button issue. It's not meant to be art. It's just meant to get out there and make some money. I mean, that's technically an exploitation film,
Right, and it exploits something that's popular at the time.
and that
So,
could be
like,
anything.
right. So, like, biker films from the late 60s and early 70s, those were exploiting the biker movement.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people sort of attribute the origin. If you want to kind of nail it down, if you feel you have to find out, well, what was the first slasher film? A lot of people attribute this to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960. By the same token, though, other people will say it's Peeping Tom from the same year. But then you've got the Krimi films, which are from Germany, and of course the Giallo films. Everybody loves Giallo films. Or everybody who loves or is deep into horror loves Giallo films, and those I think really helped springboard the slasher sub genre. Um, you
It
know,
What are
sounds
what
so
are
interesting.
what are Giallo films? Are they Italian films or?
Giallo. Well, we'll get into that now.
Oh,
Those are
okay, okay,
Italian.
okay.
Let me just start with Psycho because I just want to briefly touch on that. It was very groundbreaking and boundary pushing for its time. Again, it's widely considered the progenitor of the slasher films. But you could argue that it's not a true slasher like Texas Chainsaw because, like a Texas Chainsaw, you don't see hardly any blood.
Hmm.
There's so many nuances to these films. The Psycho has this very small body count. The protagonist or antagonist, however you want to put Norman Bates, he's generally weaker than someone say like Jason or Michael Myers.
Hmm.
And then of course there's a movie called Peeping Tom. Bill, do you want to speak to Peeping Tom?
It's been such a long time since I saw it, and you know what? I was not into it when I saw it because it has such a great reputation. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to check out Peeping Tom. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was, I don't know. It does have a lot of the, it's very artistically made, which is, one of the reasons that people celebrate it. It's similar to Psycho in that regard. It's a very well made film. And I noticed that right away. That was my biggest takeaway from Peeping Tom is that it looks great. It's got interesting, uh, it's got really interesting production values. So that's what I would say about Peeping Tom. But as to whether it inspired the slasher genre, these are these are sort of aggregation, like a subgenre like the slasher. It's not any one thing that you can really trace it to. It's an accumulation of things and ideas that resulted in a particular kind of film. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on something similar last week when we spoke about the Mexican horror films, in particular the luchador films, where it really took
Yeah.
4, 5, 6 movies for them to sort of refine it into what we know as the luchador films today. Um, so let's jump into, Mike had the question of what's a giallo film. It's an Italian term that means yellow. And basically, giallo films, a broad definition would be that they're, mystery and thrillers. And there's a lot of criteria that kind of goes into what makes it giallo. Giallo means yellow, as I said, and it's basically they had these cheap paperback mysteries and crime thrillers that had yellow spines on them. So when you walked into the bookstore, you would see them from a distance. It would attract your eye. And so I think some of the early films were based on some of these stories. If not, they were told in the style of these stories. um it's here we go. I found another definition online. Giallo refers specifically to a particular Italian horror genre that has mystery or detective elements, often contains slasher, crime fiction, psychological thriller, psychological horror, sexploitation, and less frequently supernatural horror elements. And those I know are in all kinds of Giallo films. And they kind of developed in the late 60s and peaked in popularity in the 70s. Some examples of these films, and maybe Mike, you may have heard of these: Blood and Black Lace by Mario Bava in 1964, The Embalmer by Dino Tavella in 65, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage by Dario Argento from 1970, Five Dolls for an August Moon, which is also Mario Bava from 70, and Bay of Blood from Mario Bava, once again directing in 1971. And that is most considered the progenitor to Friday the 13th, because a lot of their scenes of kills were lifted directly from this movie. Am I not correct, Bill?
Absolutely. Bay of Blood is one of my favorite films, period. I could just get lost in that movie, and I kind of want to go live there, except without the machete killings and, various implements. It's not only a machete. It's very creative and inventive in the death scenes. In America, it was retitled Twitch of the Death Nerve.
Oh,
And
that's a great title.
That's when I first discovered it, was Twitch of the Death Nerve.
You can't argue with that title. That movie had so many titles, though, it would be hard to pin them down. I am still discovering new titles for Bay of Blood. I just discovered 2 this week. So it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things about Bay of Blood is, Roger, you mentioned how it inspired sort of Friday the 13th. It also was linked to Last House on the Left, because Last House came out in 1972. Bay of Blood was made in 1971, but in 1977, a distributor in the United States released it to theaters as Last House Part 2. And of course, it has nothing to do with Last House on the Left. It was made a year before Last House on the Left, but that didn't stop them from passing it off as a Last House sequel. And that's where a lot of people saw Bay of Blood. In fact, probably, the folks who were inspired by Friday the 13th. I mean, that was a collaboration of talent in the first place. So a lot of the people involved in that film probably saw Twitch of the Death Nerve, aka Bay of Blood, as Last House Part 2.
Yeah. Oh my God. We've seen so many examples of that. I mean, we've even talked about Dawn of the Dead and Zombie 2 and all that.
Hey, Roger, you mentioned Dario Argento's name in there. Why do I know that name? What else has he done?
Oh, he's done a ton of horror movies. In fact, I think we watched it when we were kids. I got it on Laserdisc, teens. Suspiria. He's done a bunch of movies. Tenebra.
Deep Red.
Deep Red. Yes, I was trying to
saw that thing, I think. Yeah. That's
a really good one.
Yeah.
Okay. His daughter is Asia Argento, who was in tons of movies, Triple X and The Land of the Dead.
I knew the name. It's just familiar. I was just looking. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He was also one of the producers of Dawn of the Dead. He funded George Romero a lot of the money to make Dawn of the Dead. And in fact, Dario Argento invited George to stay at his apartment in Rome to write the script. So he went to Italy and stayed with Dario Argento to write that movie. And Dario Argento had the rights to distribute that in Italy and do his own cut. So he recut the movie for the Italian market. And it's a very, very different version of Dawn of the Dead. It's like gutted. There's nothing but violence and cruelty in it. So highly recommended.
I could be wrong, but I think that version's available on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's all out there. Wow. It's been released on DVD at least once, and I'm sure it's on the Blu-ray set. So it's out there. You can find it. The international version, I think is what it's called.
Now, this other type of film, sort of like Giallo's, is from Germany. They're called Krimi films. And actually, I have to admit, in my research for today's episode, I had never heard of Krimi films. Although I'd heard of many of the films themselves, I'd never heard of the term. It's basically short for criminal film or crime film, which is German. from the late 50s and the 60s, and they're based on the works of British novelist Edgar Wallace. And like modern slasher films, they kind of focus on elusive or powerful masked villains. In fact, in these films, the bad guys are so important often that they appear in the movie's title, like Face of the Frog and Creature with the Blue Hand, as well as the Dr. Mabuse films, which I'm very familiar with those. In addition, they also tend to feature stock casts that parallel those of the slasher movies. You know, you get the female protagonist, the comic relief character, the police officer who's central to the case, and a group of victims who get picked off one by one. And you know, what's interesting too is that these movies have a lot of violence, especially once color film was available. It just opened up the possibilities for these movies. So, Bill, are you familiar with this term?
With the Crimmy films?
Yeah.
A little. I mean, I'm not extremely well versed in it, but a lot of those movies actually were released in the United States in the 1970s under various titles. One of them was What Have They Done to Your Daughters?
Yes.
Which I think it was reissued as the Co-Ed Murders at some point, like during the actual 80s slasher boom. It was reissued as the Co-Ed Murders and sort of passed off as a contemporary slasher, which it isn't. But
Yeah.
that never stopped anybody before.
Right. So basically, the slasher genre in America, anyways, kind of hit its peak between 78 and 84, which I don't know if this is accurate or not. I don't know if I would call it this, but some people have referred to it as the golden age of slasher films. And you know, obviously within these 2 decades, you had, like we said, Texas Chainsaw from 74, Halloween from 78, Friday the 13th from 1980, Nightmare on Elm Street was 84, Child's Play from 88, Candyman from 92, Scream from 96, and I Know What You Did Last Summer from 97. Those are just some of them. In fact, as I think about it, yeah, there, with the exception of Black Christmas, they've all gone on to become franchises of some kind, whether it's just 3 movies or more.
Well, that's a franchise. They keep remaking it. There's never been a sequel, but they've remade it 3 times, I think, by now.
That's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, and that's a really good one, Black Christmas. Is that the one with Margot Kidder?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies too. I'm making a whole list just on this very program, apparently.
What? So wait, something you said, Bill. Something is still considered a franchise if it's not a bunch of sequential sequels.
You know, what?
Black Christmas. Yeah. You know, it doesn't have to be a sequel to be in a franchise. I mean, Black Christmas never branched out into sequels, but for some reason it just keeps getting remade, and each time it gets remade, it's changed to the point where the original is like lost in the dust back there somewhere. The most recent one was it had a really bizarre plot to it that had nothing to do really with the original Black Christmas. So that was a real interesting experience.
So as long as it's connected to the original, that's weird.
It looks like
what, Roger disappeared.
We lost Roger, and it said
we lost Roger. I'm sure he'll come back. Oh, there he is.
Oh, there he is.
So as long as it's connected to the original intellectual property, it's considered part of the franchise.
Yeah, like someone owns that, and so they had to get somebody's permission to make those movies. So that's what makes it a franchise. Is somebody's building, making money off of this.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because I
apologize, guys. I got bumped out for some reason, and
you vanished.
That was very strange.
You guys were starting to go in slow motion.
Oh, really?
And then
that's how it always happens, Roger. Then the bright light happens.
Yes. They took him. Yeah, I mean, you know, all of these, every single one of these things that these film titles that I just mentioned, they're still popular today, you know.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're either remaking them or still making sequels to them. So it's really a testament that, you know, even though it's not considered high art, they're still fun, entertaining movies, and everybody who enjoys them takes something away that they like. You know, everyone has their favorite of the franchises.
Yeah.
I heard some people recently talking about Candyman and how much they loved it, and I'm like, I may have to revisit the first one at least just to see. But it was not one of my favorites.
I don't remember why. There was some talk about Candyman in general a few months ago. My roommate and I decided to watch the first one because neither of us had seen it. And it was okay. I don't know. Maybe it was like you had to see it at the time it came out or something, but
it was really scary. I remember when it first came out, I went to see it theatrically, and I thought it was a really scary movie because it played loose with the cast. Like there were people in the cast that ended up as victims that you really liked, which is a must for any kind of slasher or a movie where some people are going to start dying. You have to care about them, and Candyman did that very well. I thought every death was a tragedy. I saw the remake not too long ago, reboot, whatever you want to call it. That movie played so safe. It was like it had its hands tied behind its back, especially the hand with the hook. It was just totally was
it rated R?
Oh yeah, it was gory and it was rated R, but it just was it was gutless. It wasn't scary at all because nobody that you cared about in the film died. Everybody that died in the film was either rotten, reprehensible, or someone we didn't know and care about.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, that's probably why it kind of came up as a topic of conversation for you, because that film just came out, like within the last, about 6 months ago or so, something like that.
Yeah, and my roommate and I both like horror, but like we've seen different things. And I think, there was a remake come out, and that got us talking. Did you ever see the first one? And I knew that there had been a franchise before, and I was like, I never explored that, so I figured I'd check it out.
Yeah.
But I think, I think something Bill kind of, offshoot of what Bill was just saying is that a lot of movies these days, the characters are they're just paper cutouts. Like they don't develop. The writers these days, not just in horror films, but in general, they don't take the time to develop the characters so that you care what happens to them.
Right.
At least that's my opinion.
Right.
That was what made the original Halloween so good. Was that the characters were all identifiable. You liked every single one of them. And it was a scary thing when they were confronted with something you knew was going to kill them. You felt vulnerable because of them.
Right. So, guys, if you want to just continue the conversation for 1 second, I have to resend the link to Spency.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty much true of what you just said about the characters. I'm thinking of the Scream movies where Dewey pretty much gets killed but lives, several times over. And each time I thought he had been killed, I was like crushed. Oh God, no, Dewey. I cared. So. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
How old were you when you first saw Halloween, the original? I mean, do you remember it? You don't have to, it doesn't matter really.
When I was younger, I wasn't super into horror. Roger got me into horror when I got to be about 12, 13. So a lot of the original ones I only saw after their theatrical run. I don't remember exactly when I saw the first Halloween. No.
Yeah. That's something that's totally lost today. And that's another thing that I'm trying to recapture by doing Drive-In Asylum. And it's this sense of wonder that accompanied movies like that when we were young. And it wasn't only because we were kids, it was because these were movies that hadn't been done before. They were capturing the imagination of people in one way or another. Like, slasher movies were going after something completely different. They were going after a visceral reaction. But Halloween was not a slasher film, even though it inspired numerous slasher films. Halloween it's much more artistically valid than a typical slasher film. And that's not to I don't want to shit on anybody's movie and say it's not a good movie, even if it was cheaply made, cheaply acted. I mean, those are some of my favorite films, but it was not Halloween. Halloween was something special is what I mean to say. And it was it was a labor of love made by film students or people who were just recently film students. It was not a shrewd attempt at a cash grab.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they took the time to build up the fear too.
Interesting.
Absolutely. Very suspenseful. That was the majority of what was going on in Halloween, was suspense. The kills were not that graphic.
No, not at all. I saw that in the movies too. My parents took me to see that, and that was one of those things. Afterwards, it would come on TV like almost every year in around Halloween time, and that was always sort of like Wizard of Oz. It was something fun to look forward to. I apologize. Keep talking about the hell.
Do you remember the first time it was on television, Mike?
No, I never watched them. I very rarely watched movies when they were on TV, because after I had done it once or twice, I got irritated by the commercials interrupting. And but no, I don't remember seeing it on TV. I think I saw it on videotape.
How old are you?
51.
Okay, so I'm 52. So we're about the same age. But Halloween was first shown on network TV in 1981. And it was Halloween weekend in 1981. Theatrically, Halloween 2 was in theaters. And that opened on the same night that Halloween showed on NBC for the very first time. And that's where the different footage comes from for Halloween, the original film. There were additional themes filmed for the for the television version because of the violence that they had to cut out. So John Carpenter shot 3 additional scenes using the film crew for Halloween 2, which he also directed like 2 or 3 sequences in Halloween 2.
Yeah.
And he shot some additional footage for the NBC version of Halloween. And it just seemed like such a huge deal to us back then. I mean, I was 11 years old by that point, but I was obsessed with horror movies, especially Halloween. And it was just mind blowing to have access to something like that back then.
Yeah, I am not really that good at remembering the first times I saw things, but the one scene from Halloween that I always sticks in my head, and I think scared the shit out of me for quite a while at the time, was when she's hiding in the closet. And he comes on the outside of the closet, and then he just starts bashing his arm through the slats of the closet, and the pieces going everywhere. And just that moment of like, fuck, he found me and I'm dead, that scared me to death.
There was something really terrifying about that. And not only the situation she was in, but the way they captured it. Like you said, with the closet bursting apart, there was like real violence in that scene that was terrifying, and she was sort of helpless on the floor of the closet. Carpenter did that effortlessly. It seemed effortless anyway in the finished film.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that sort of started the trend of the extended ending, where he's stabbed, you think he's dead, he gets back up again, you hit him again, you think he's dead, then finally you shoot him, and then he's gone. And I think that was one of the first times where that had been done. Because that was 78. Terminator didn't come out till 84, and that had a similar kind of ending where every time you think he's dead, he keeps coming back.
Well, the first Halloween ended with him getting shot and falling out, and then when they look out, he's not there, right? Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Okay. So we didn't actually see him get. Sorry. Oh.
I think Roger dropped out again.
Yeah, he's frozen on my screen. So that's what made that movie even more scary to me, the first one, because you don't know what happened. Where did he go?
There was no real conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it stays in your head. Where did he go? What, is he gonna come get me now? Go home, try to go to sleep.
Roger, are you there?
Oh, I can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
You dropped out there for a second, so we kept talking. Sorry if we talked over you.
That's fine. For some reason, I don't know. Spencer's having technical troubles trying to get on. I'm having issues here. My Wi-Fi keeps getting.
It says on my screen, Roger Froyland's network bandwidth is low. So maybe is there something else eating?
You know what? Yeah, hold on. Let me close this window here. Actually, that's what it is. I have too many tabs open in Opera.
That'll do it. Tabs. Those pesky tabs. But it's good to hear that Spencer's coming on.
Tab soda. Remember Tab?
Worked until 8.
He's trying. I told him just to call into the phone number if he can't get on.
Oh,
So,
okay.
all right. So let's see. Oh, I can't do that. All right. Can you guys hear and see me okay now?
You're a
Yeah.
little scratchy.
Why did-
It's not crystal clear, but yes. Poor Roger.
Yeah,
I know.
that's weird. All right, hold on. I'm going. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to do one other thing here. Okay. I'm going
I feel like I'm passing out.
Hello. Okay. You're stroking out.
Yeah, right. It's the same
Wi-Fi.
sensation.
Huh?
Or was it like sometimes there was a point where cell phones were just coming out, where sometimes you'd see in a movie, maybe even now, sometimes people pretending that the signal was going out. They
Yeah.
want to talk to somebody. I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Tomorrow.
I'm in the
and then
tunnel.
they hang up. Yeah, I'm in a tunnel. Right.
I
I'm
think
in a tunnel or an elevator.
Can anyone hear me? Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, now I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you.
For me, the video is really like slow, like you're in slow motion, but
It's
the
choppy. Yeah.
voice, I can hear your voice.
Okay. Maybe I'll shut my camera off for now and then see how that goes.
All right.
I think Chevy Chase did that in Fletch, where he was like, yep, microphone, you know.
I think I was watching Better Call Saul the other day, and I think he did it once. Yeah,
That's fun.
but yeah, and then for a while, like now,
so,
the big common trope with cell phones is people forget that they have the phone and they're trying to hide from somebody, and then their phone rings, or they get a text and it
Oh,
gives it
yeah.
away. Yeah,
Or that scene from A Quiet Place, or A Quiet Place 2,
yeah,
where they're hiding from the monsters that are sound oriented, and someone's cell phone goes off and the
Yeah.
whole place is torn apart.
yeah. That's terrifying. Yeah.
It's so funny too, like when people they always have to come up with a plot device why the cell phones don't work. So when people are trapped somewhere, they can't call for help, characters.
My battery's dead. I can't get a signal. Yeah.
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 So real quick, I wasn't gonna read all the films off, but we might as well. There's not a lot, but I just figured I'd read off the list of the Halloween films. Of course, we've talked about Halloween from 78. Then Halloween 2 came out in 81. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch came out in 1982, and that one starred Tom motherfucking Atkins, who's awesome.
Mhm.
His
Halloween-
legal middle name is motherfucking.
Right. 1988, we saw Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. In 89 was Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And let's see, 95, we jump up a few years to Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. And Mike, you and I definitely saw that in the theater. That was when they came up with that whole plot line of Thorn, and to explain why Michael was the way he was. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
Then,
Sorry.
of course, 98 was, what'd you say, Bill?
I was just gagging on The Curse of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
I didn't say it was a good movie. I just said I remember seeing Halloween H2O 20 years later from 98, in which Jamie Lee Curtis came back. And she promptly gets killed off first 5 minutes in Resurrection from 2002. Then there are the two Rob Zombie films from 2007 and 2009. They're remakes, Halloween and Halloween 2 in respectively. And then in 2018, returned 44
I'm losing you, man.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Raj.
It's
Well, I can jump in.
yeah.
Halloween 2018. That was the return of John Carpenter. Well, Roger has a note for the return of Carpenter. He did the music for that, and it was 44 years later. That movie,
Wow.
it just sort of like took everything that I liked about the Halloween franchise and just crushed it. I'm talking Halloween 2018. I was gonna say, when the subject of the curse of Michael Myers came up, I thought of like it should have been subtitled, "We no longer have any idea what made Halloween scary."
Yeah.
But Halloween 2018 blew that out of the water because it just was so annoying and it just grated on my nerves. I don't know how you guys felt about it. Maybe you guys liked it better than I did.
I don't remember that one specifically. It's all kind of a blur to me, but I know when Roger was talking about Season of the Witch and maybe this bleeds over into the film, the 2018 one. I don't quite remember, but whenever they try to explain something,
yeah,
like so much after the fact, it's like, don't try to explain it now. We already accept the fact that Michael Myers is, who gives, I don't really care how he got that way. Like, that much, he's here, he's scary. That's all I care about,
I enjoyed. Now, Bill, was that a direct sequel to the first one or the second one?
2018.
Yeah.
It was a direct sequel to the original, and it acted like Halloween 2 never happened.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's a whole thing online. If you go and check it out, you can find there's different, basically there's so many alternate timelines in the Halloween universe. It's insane.
Yeah.
But I
They're
like,
still looking for an interesting one.
right. I like it. I mean, I didn't like, if you want to go back a little bit to where's my notes here? Like whatchamacallit, like you said, Curse of Michael Myers. It basically Halloween 3 we'll talk about separately because that doesn't actually take place in the Michael Myers universe. But I liked part 4. I liked 2 and 4. But then when 5 came out, 5, The Curse, those were kind of stinky. H2O I kind of wanted to like. Then Resurrection was just terrible. We'll talk about the Rob Zombie films in a bit, but I kind of like what Carpenter's done with these new ones. I especially liked Halloween Kills. I thought that was really good. I was on the edge of my seat in the theater with that one.
I just watched that the other night.
Yeah,
it was good.
Well, what did you mean? I saw your note next to Halloween 2018, Return of Carpenter. So
he returned to directing, even though he had produced part 2 and I think part 3.
Carpenter didn't direct those.
No, he produced them.
Oh, he produced them. Okay.
He returned after 44 years would be to 1978. So
I think he just sort of like accepted a credit for those movies. Because they were developed by Blumhouse, and Carpenter came on sort of like probably as a figurehead, because I know no one hates the Halloween franchise more than John Carpenter. Because that's the truth. I mean, like he really hated those movies, and he hated making them. He didn't want to make Halloween 2, but he just did that sort of as a favor for Irwin Yablans, and he did it to get in. He wanted a deal with Avco Embassy, which they were the studio that put out The Fog and his other Escape from New York. So Avco Embassy was like what he was looking to make movies for them, and he made Halloween 2 as a favor, like to get this deal with Avco Embassy. It was a deal with Irwin Yablans. So he didn't want to do it, and he said he got drunk and wrote the script one night, and like that was Halloween 2. But he just sort of like washed his hands of the whole thing. He and Deborah Hill produced Halloween 3, because that was going to be, I don't know, I don't want to get there too soon, Roger.
No, you can go into it if you want.
Halloween 3 was going to be an anthology for the series. They were just done with Halloween 2. He said Carpenter said that he designed Halloween 2 to put an end to Michael Myers. That's why you see him literally burning to a crisp at the end of Halloween 2. He was like, I had to completely obliterate him. And then they were going to make a new story every year. There would be, or whenever they could get the funding to make another Halloween movie, it would just be a different story taking place on Halloween. And audiences rejected that.
Right. And it's funny. It's too bad. Hindsight is 2020. Because when I saw Halloween 3 in the theater, I didn't much like it, although it did scare the shit out of me anyways. I mean, I was 12. So that might have contributed to me not liking the film. But even though I watched so many that scared the shit out of me to this day. But if you rewatch that film, it is a really good, really scary movie. It's well done. Like we said, has nothing to do with Michael Myers. It was about these witch, this coven, but they're not traditional witches. They're like a corporation, and they create these masks and on Halloween night, when this commercial that's playing on TV, it's been counting down all the days, and when it gets to that final countdown, the final number, and at the certain time of the day or night, these masks are going to explode, and snakes and like lizards and spiders are going to come out and kill all the kids and the families and everything.
Oh, wow.
The children. I mean, the children were the target of this. So
Yeah.
that was, I don't think you could get away with something like that today.
Yeah, no, you couldn't. Mike, have you seen Halloween 3?
I honestly don't remember. To be honest, I know I saw the first one. I've seen the first one multiple times. I don't remember the second one or anything else until like H2O. So I probably saw a couple in between with you, but I don't remember anything concretely, unfortunately. Bill was asking me when I saw the first Halloween, and I don't even think I saw the first one in the theater. I think I saw it on video. I think maybe you showed it to me.
Probably.
Like a couple of years later, or whenever the VCRs became a thing.
Yeah, I vividly remember seeing that in the theater, and the Halloween 2. Actually, I've seen pretty much all of them in the theater, but Halloween 2 I saw at the drive-in with my parents, and I'll never forget that, because I remember the poor trick-or-treater that happened to be dressed up like Michael Myers gets run over and exploded and burnt.
Oh yeah, Ben Tramer.
Yeah. Like, oh man, seriously. So yeah, they had a lot of rough patches over the years, though. They try to come back with Michael Myers because people were so against part 3. And I thought Halloween 4 was a decent movie, a decent horror movie. It's nowhere near the first film at all, but it had some great moments. It had some good music. It tried to take the story in a different direction, where it turns out that Jamie Lee Curtis had a daughter, and she kind of hid her away and went off and supposedly died in a plane crash or something. And Michael Myers comes back, and he's homing in on her, because somehow they have this telepathic connection. And that was sort of why, because that's what Halloween 2 does. It's not explained in the first one. Is that supposedly what do you call it? Supposedly he's her younger brother.
Her
And
older brother.
Okay.
older brother. I'm sorry. No,
I was wondering
right,
what
'cause
movie
Laurie was
introduced
the
that
baby.
idea.
That's right. Yeah.
Ah,
So that came from part 2. So then in part 4, he's homing in on his niece.
John
Again,
Carpenter was drunk when he came up with that idea.
but
It was-
a lot of people who are not even Halloween fans, they remember that. They remember
Yeah.
hearing at some point that they were brother and sister, and but later that was kind of a scrapped idea, wasn't it?
What
They
a
just-
horrible takeaway from the
Yeah.
Halloween universe is that
Yeah.
Michael and Laurie are brother and sister. It's a ridiculous idea on its face, because it insinuates that if we have Dr. Loomis, who admits that he's been obsessed with Michael Myers since the day he met him. He knew he was pure evil, and that he had to stop him from doing whatever it was he was going to do. And somehow Dr. Loomis never knew that Michael had a younger sister who was Sue.
Yeah.
And 2
He didn't
years
do his
later,
research.
yeah, 2 years later, she's 4 years old, and the parents die in a crash, and a family in Haddonfield, this tiny little postage stamp town, adopts Laurie, and they think they have to seal the records because no one's going to know it's her.
Yeah.
The whole fucking town would know it was her. She would know it was her. She would know who she was. Dr.
Right.
Loomis would know who she was. It just
Right.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. That's yeah.
I actually never thought about
that. it even makes the first movie less scary, I think, because there's something.
Yes.
It's scarier to think, why is he so fixated on her, than it is to be like, oh, I know why he's fixated on her. Like,
yeah, if you give him a motive, that makes it much less frightening, because now you're only in trouble if you're in Laurie's way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole idea of Halloween was that it could happen to anybody, and that it happened to these vulnerable young women, these young girls who were high school age. That was really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll skip over Part 5 and Curse of Michael Myers. They try to expand on the mythology and explain why Michael Myers is the way he is, and it just gets so convoluted that after a while you just don't give a shit anymore.
I want to talk about H20.
Yes, I was just getting into that. Go ahead.
H20 is my favorite of the lesser sequels. Because I really don't like the majority of this series all that much. I love the original 2. I even love Halloween 2, even though I just basically said it was stupid. That doesn't mean I don't love it. It's actually one of my favorite movies, Halloween 2. I don't love it more than the original, but it's close because it's like a you can almost hear the script meeting when they got together to come up with the idea of Halloween 2, or at least like when they were spitballing this with John Carpenter. They're like, here's what we want. But H20 I thought was actually a very good return to their spirit of the original. It had so many problems though that it kind of like got tanked. It's like 2/3 of a really good movie. The rest of it has all these sort of inappropriate Scream references. And the mask is laughable. It's just a really silly Michael Myers mask. It's silly looking. If you can get past that, this has H20 has some of the scariest chase scenes in the entire series.
Yes.
And the suspense is what makes it more like the original film. It gets back to suspense instead of gore, which I loved about H20. There's good and there's bad in it.
I gotta watch that one again.
Oh my God. And it ends the Michael and Laurie story forever. Because at the end of the movie, she chops off his fucking head. And that's what we wanted to see her do. Like ever since the first movie, we've been thinking, I wish somebody would just chop off that guy's head or whatever. And she does it at the end of H20. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't want any more Michael and Laurie.
Yeah.
It was not to be.
Until Halloween Resurrection, where it turned out somehow he quickly switched clothes with the ambulance driver, and it was his head that got cut off.
That's the classic example of a retcon right there.
Like that's the kind of trope that would work on a soap opera, but not in a horror movie. Like
An
this.
episode of Scooby-Doo is what I was thinking of.
Right. Oh man, yeah, H2O was good. I remember that being the first time I saw Josh Hartnett on screen. That might have been his first role. I thought the cast was really good in that. I thought it was cool. Again, it kind of speaks to why I kind of like Halloween 2018, because it's similar in that we see Laurie grown up and how she's been traumatized by the events of the first film and what she's done to protect herself since then. She's moved away. She's changed her name. She, smartly moved away, instead of staying in Haddonfield. It's like you said, the chase scenes are they're really good. It's really well done. It's got a higher budget, so it's a lot cleaner looking, a lot more slick, which I don't know if that takes away. Like the original, if you watch a high definition version of it's great anyways, but it still has that gritty kind of independent film feel, and this doesn't have that. That's, I think, one of the things it's lacking. But yeah, to all your points, Bill, I think you're spot on with H2O. Which this all right. I'm gonna go off on a tangent here for a second.
Oh man,
I was talking to my wife about this the other day. What were we watching? I forget. But I was like, at what point did movies all of a sudden become abbreviations? Like you had Terminator 2 came out and it was T2.
T2.
Yeah. X-Men 2 came out. It was X2. H2O. I guess the H stands for Halloween and it's 20 years later. But when people look at that, you think water. So
right. Like, what's the point of that? Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all marketing. It's all film marketing. And marketing in itself has changed so much since the days of Halloween. So yeah, everything has to be immediately identifying and as few characters as possible. Then you can sell it to a whole bunch of people.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then if you know the abbreviation and you start talking about it, and someone who doesn't know what that is, then it kind of makes them feel like they're on the outside of something cool. So then you got to explain to them what the reference, what the abbreviation is, and then okay, you're part of the club now. Like it's
right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like Spency's going to be able to join us. I mean, I've been trying to tell him just call in the stupid phone number, and he's not doing that. So Let's jump
man.
over to the Halloween, the Rob Zombie films. I know they're very controversial among fans, and I'm just going to start go on record as saying I really like them. Obviously, the second one is inferior to the first one, but I thought it was an interesting take where it's from the point of view of Michael Myers rather than Laurie Strode. So it focuses on him. I mean, yeah, you could argue, well, it kind of gives him an origin and it gives him a reason for killing, but not really. It just sort of expands what Loomis had been saying, was that he's pure evil. He
Mhm.
doesn't really have a motive in this except for the fact that he's nutsy cuckoo.
Right.
I
He's been
mean,
fucked up since he was a child, and nobody really knows
yeah.
why.
So, Mike, do you want to talk about the Rob Zombie remake?
What I remember is I really loved the first one. Like I saw it in the theater, and I couldn't. I mean, it had been ages since I had seen the original, so but I wanted to see it because Rob Zombie was cool at the time, and I was just interested. Like, how far was he going to take things? And I remember loving. I know I just said a few minutes ago here that when they explain something or they say where it comes from, it makes it less scary. But in a way, I liked in that particular movie. I liked it. I liked that he beat that kid to death with a tree branch, and that when he was in the asylum as a kid, he like stabbed the nurse or whatever. And like you said, they showed him as a kid, but they still never really explained why he was like that. It wasn't just, oh, he had trauma and then he freaked out. They didn't really show why. So anyway, and then they showed the actual event of him killing, his family, which was cool. And then once he actually, to be honest, I didn't really care that much about that scene, but okay. I mean, it was there, but because they had talked about it in the original. And then once he became Michael Myers in this movie, he was so huge. The guy they cast was so big
Yeah, Tyler
and
Mane.
just fucking unstoppable. He was like a locomotive wearing overalls. He just like not whatever you threw at him, he just walked through it. And I thought that was pretty cool. I thought the main girl, was her name Laurie Strode in this one?
Yeah.
I forget
Yes.
if they had the same name. I
Yeah.
remember they developed her a little bit more. She's more of a modern teenager kind of thing. And she fought back a little bit more aggressively than, I guess teenagers would have in the past. And what I really liked is how they did the reversal of him knocking her off the porch and out the window onto the lawn. And then something distracts him. And when he looks back, she's gone. So that was like a twist on I thought that was really clever. And I love the first one. The second Rob Zombie movie, I hated. It's like night and day. And I don't really know why exactly, except that I remember thinking, there's no point to this. Like, I don't, kind of something Bill had said earlier. Everybody he killed, I didn't care that he was killing them because like they were all pieces of shit. They're all just, and he was just walking around killing people. Goes into the strip club. He kills the stripper. He kills the guy who runs the strip club. Walks up some random guy near the dumpster. Tries to punch him and nothing happens. He kills him. And I was just like, I mean, I don't remember the whole movie, but I just remember hating the second one because it just seemed empty of any purpose. Yeah. So that's my take.
Bill, what's your take?
I'm the complete opposite of both you guys. I really love Halloween 2. I love Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 more than his original remake.
Wow.
Because it was for one of the reasons that you mentioned, Mike, was that he made Michael Myers into a train that runs people over. And I didn't think that was scary. I was like, oh, it was just like watching I don't know, like it was like watching a slaughterhouse video where like what's going to happen. Yeah. When you have something like Michael Myers that can't be stopped and can somehow like pummel a police cruiser and like tear right into it like it was a birthday cake or something. Like, I don't know. I thought that was, it's your movie, do whatever you want,
Right.
I'll go along for the ride. It's just I thought it was sort of just not very interesting to me. But his Halloween 2 really kind of blew my mind because I was excited about it. I think Rob Zombie's a great director. A lot of people shit on him, but I think he's a great director. I don't think he's made like his best movie yet. I hope he hasn't because I think he could do great things with a movie. I've seen him, like I loved The Devil's Rejects is great.
Yeah.
House of a Thousand Corpses, visually, it's a great film. It went a little too far all over the map for me, but I wanted to see what he'd do with Halloween 2. And this was his license to make his own original story from the Halloween universe. And because he didn't remake the John Carpenter scripted Halloween 2 from 1981.
Right.
Although there is that lovely homage to it, where he goes to the hospital, he chases her to the hospital and kills some of the nurses and orderlies. I thought that part was really frightening, and it was beautiful. It was all shot in green, and it had Knights of White Satin playing over it. It was like a fucking Mario Bava movie. And I thought that was a brilliant twist. Maybe it was inappropriate for a Halloween film. I'll grant you that. But I thought he was showing a lot more imagination with that second film than he was with the first. I see Spency's here.
Yeah.
Finally.
Hey, man.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Oh my God, you got some face fuzz. You didn't have that last time I saw you.
I know. Oh my God, my brightness is up so high.
Yeah, that's cool. It looks good.
Thank you.
Where are you? You look like you're in a crawl space. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is creepy.
I am in my basement. That's where I've been living for the summer.
What's up
okay.
behind you?
It's like poles and pillars.
Yeah,
and...
yeah. We put up these like blankets.
There's somebody walking towards you.
Yeah,
there is somebody.
There we go.
There is somebody.
Awful.
Spencer, can you crank your brightness down a little or no? Oh, there
it
go.
goes.
Yeah, that's better. I could turn my night light on. That's better.
Cool.
How on earth do I?
So
use
we've just been talking about the Halloween franchise, and Bill was giving us his thoughts on the Rob Zombie films. That he liked Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 better than Rob Zombie's Halloween. Do you want to give us your opinion on the Rob Zombies, and then maybe go back and talk about the the films leading up to that before John Carpenter came back?
That's my girlfriend.
Hey.
I was worried.
They could see you. So my thoughts on the first Rob Zombie film, the first Rob Zombie Halloween film, I thought it was good. I really liked it. But I thought there was a lot of choices that were a little excessive for a few reasons. But once we got into the action, and once we actually got to see, finally we get to see the star character go out and do his thing on the town. It's a lot better, and I think it's a really, really great Halloween movie. It's just got some questionable choices in there. I never saw Halloween 2, so I can't truly say how good that one was or wasn't. But it's not awful. It's a different take.
What's one of the questionable choices that jumps to your mind?
I mean, giving Michael Myers a whole backstory isn't exactly it kind of defeats what makes him scary in a way, but at the same time, I think it was done kind of well.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Okay, good.
Yeah, I thought it was done good. I just didn't think it was truly all necessary.
Right.
And then I think it's the director's cut that has his escape scene has 2 different versions.
Oh.
I don't know if anybody remembers that one, but I believe it's the director's cut that has the much more graphic escape scene.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and not graphic in like a fun slasher way. It's a very disturbing way, and I didn't love that going through it. But once we got past that part and he had to kill Danny Trejo, that was sad.
That was sad.
What did you think about how powerful he was? That's something Bill and I sort of disagreed on.
I absolutely loved his fight in the bathroom with that, I can't remember that gentleman's name, but the really big wrestler where they destroyed the bathroom stall wall.
That was Ken Foree, who was in Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting to watch, because we're not used to seeing Michael Myers with this excessive strength. But it works. I really thought it works, and it made him that much scarier, knowing that, okay, he wasn't just going to kill you. He can actually overpower most of us if he tried.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really fun, because we don't get to see him use brute force too much. It's a lot of ambush tactics. And he's very smart. And I remember Halloween 2018 had a lot of really good moments that kind of showed his style, but not a lot of things outside of that scene and outside of that movie show just how terrifying, powerful he can be.
No, it's interesting you bring that up because I know Mike brought that up too. That's one of the cool things, and I love that about that movie as well. Is that he's just this imposing monster. But a lot of people have criticized that because if he's been sitting in a cell for 20 years or whatever, how would he? How would he be able to build his body up like that? And was he just drinking protein shakes and working out at the gym all day long? I think
he's pure evil, man. He's beyond the laws of muscle and whatnot.
I mean, how did he know how to drive in the very first one?
Somebody obviously taught him how.
Exactly. So it's like maybe there could be things going on, but I thought it was very, very fun watching him when he like first stands up and he's got the handcuffs on and all that stuff, and it's not till he's like agitated that he starts flashing out and killing people. I found it very, very unsettling how casual like Danny Trejo was around him and all that stuff, and it just got worse and worse. And I really did enjoy a lot of the choices that were made. It's just, once again, I'm not a huge fan of Rob Zombie films in general, so I thought it was done well, but some of the touches that make it a Rob Zombie film weren't my favorite. I heard it put bluntly was that Rob Zombie is an excellent director. He is not the best writer.
Okay.
He tries to do the same thing over and over again. That's it. So he wants to like shoehorn like this redneck shtick that he does into all of his movies. The one thing that he did that I thought was very different than all of that, other than he kind of got away from it a little bit in Halloween 2, but the Lords of Salem is a movie where he just totally like seems to have left most of that behind, and I like that movie a hell of a lot more for that very reason. I think it's awesome.
That's a scary movie. That's really good.
Yeah.
Bill, can you? I'm sorry, but like Spencer sort of came in while you were talking about Halloween 2 and why you liked it better than the first. I just wanted to hear a little more about that from you.
It was very visual, and everything was unexpected in it because there was no story that we were expecting from that one. That we were expecting to see the story of the original Halloween in his first film, but Halloween 2 anything could have happened, and I liked what he did with it. I liked that he made the Dr. Loomis character really nasty and unlikable, because he was somebody that sort of like latched on to this murderous rampage and wrote a book about it and became a celebrity based on this book that he wrote about Michael Myers. I thought that was a really cynical touch to that story. And I loved that he just totally trashed the Laurie character. Like, she became this neurotic mess and her walls were painted black and she had stuff scrawled all over it. That was good. And I mean, I liked it because I hated the girls in the first one. I hated his remake. None of the girls were sympathetic to me, not even Laurie. She was kind of like, I don't know. I thought she was a little bit annoying. They definitely weren't modeling her after Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
She wasn't going to be like the little innocent girl that's like, oh my, sex? Oh, what's this? A joint? Like, that's
yeah.
That's not the same Laurie in his movies, but I like that he went in the total opposite direction in Halloween 2, and the visual aspect of it again, like the green tint to some of the sequences. I love that weird thing that he kept doing with Michael's mother coming back next to a white horse, which was totally the only reason that was in that movie was because he's obsessed with Mario Bava. And it was like his Barbara Steele moment. Like she just appears for no reason.
I hated that shit. Sorry. I was like, oh no, there she is again. Like, lady, go away.
People sometimes shit on Sherry Moon Zombie's acting. And I think in Halloween, in the first one, she was brilliant in it, especially the scene right after Michael kills the lady in the insane asylum or whatever, the prison that he was in.
Sybil Danning.
Her reaction. What?
That was
Danning.
Sybil Danning playing that
Yes,
nurse that
that's
was
right.
mean to him, and he stabbed her in the back with a fork.
That's right. And just when that's the moment, like even though Sherry Moon's character knew something was not right with him, that's when you see it in her face. It just all hits her all at once, and she just has this complete breakdown. And I think that's an impressive scene of acting. I thought she did a great job in that scene. She does,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, she does in other movies tend to do that stupid high pitched giggle, and I can't stand that. But
Yeah.
she's
I have a
really,
feeling, I don't think she's super talented overall as an actor, but I imagine Rob Zombie probably like shot that scene with her like 12 times and just psyched her out to the point where she was exhausted and terrified. And like, finally, she gave this amazing performance. He was like, all right, let's go home.
He did a Stanley Kubrick thing to her.
Yeah, right.
yeah, exactly. So Spence, you came in
Torture.
a little bit late, obviously. So do you want to speak to the previous Halloween films? Is there anything you want to touch on about those?
I mean, it's hard to say anything truly detrimental about the first one. I mean, we all can agree it's really good. After rewatching it, I didn't realize how slow it was. And I
Yeah.
get it, it's 1979, so it is what it is.
Suspense.
But it is good at that. And when I showed that to my girlfriend a long time ago, the ending like blew her away. She was
Yeah.
pissed. She was so mad.
I love that.
That
Yeah.
happened. I loved it, but she was
Yeah.
like frustrated that we didn't catch him, that nothing happened.
Yeah.
Halloween 2, I thought was good because it became this cat and mouse game. I thought that was a very good choice instead of it being this, instead of it being, okay, well, we have to reset up Michael Myers at all. It's like, we don't. We just go right from where we were. You know what you're getting into. Halloween 3 is a perfectly good movie if you took out the Halloween 3 part.
Right.
Well,
If you
Bill
call-
had explained that after part 2, John Carpenter was done with Michael Myers, so they were going to make it be a different story every Halloween. It would be a Halloween film, but it wouldn't be Michael Myers. It was never intended to be a Michael Myers franchise.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of spawned the American slasher genre in a way, and they didn't really have the bigger franchises at the time. So I can absolutely see that. But then, I mean, Halloween 4, 5, and 6 were pretty great, and their story was interesting, but it kind of deviated from the source inspiration, which is fine. I thought it was pretty good. H2O, is that the one with Busta Rhymes?
No,
No, that's Resurrection.
That's Resurrection. Right. Okay.
H2O is with
I love
Josh
Busta Rhymes.
Hartnett.
Right.
Josh Hartnett and Jamie Lee Curtis in that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I like these movies. I don't think any of them truly broke the mold too heavily up until, I mean, Resurrection was really interesting with the stylistic choice, but the content wasn't too different. And then Rob Zombie's films came up, and I like that he did something different, but it was still in the spirit of what Michael Myers was and is. And then I did not see Halloween Kills, the latest one, so I would like to. I've heard it's fantastic, but Halloween 2018 I thought was really, really good, and I enjoyed pretty much every second of it. That we got enjoyable characters, and there's some characters that die, and you're like, oh man, like come on. So it works. I think it's great.
Yeah. So I just want to mention we've got a few comments on the YouTube. For those watching, hopefully you're watching on YouTube. For some reason it wouldn't bump to Facebook as well. I'm gonna have to work on that during the week. But we've got a few comments that I thought were interesting. Someone brought up the point that we talked about Halloween 3 and how that was kind of sort of this Celtic witch cult kind of corporation thing. And they touch on that when we mentioned about Halloween 5 and the Curse of Michael Myers, where they try to use the same thing to explain his origin. So there's a connection there between that mythological origin of why Michael's the way he is and the company behind the evil masks in part 3. And then also I can't see for some reason. Bill, can you help me out here? Someone made reference to the fact that there was the masks from part 3 were seen in one of the movies.
Yeah, I think. Do you want to go,
ahead.
Bill?
It
All
was
right.
in the
That's-
last Halloween movie. It was in Halloween Kills. There were some trick-or-treaters that were wearing.
I believe there are also some in Halloween 2018 as well. I believe they've shown up in at least the most recent ones pretty consistently. And yeah, that's what I meant when I said like 4, 5, and 6 kind of deviated a little bit because they had this became, like you said, this folklore and mythical origin, which I thought was fine and I enjoyed it. But it just it starts to deviate from the first and second Halloween and what they were really all good about. But it was kind of cool too. I think there was a little bit of emulation with um Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th because both of those had like these like pseudo supernatural uh situations with how the killers were, especially by part like 6 of Friday the 13th. Was it part 6? Yeah, it was part 6 when Jason came back. So
Yeah.
I think that was kind of where part of their inspiration was like, okay, we got to add something that really is new to the audience. You know, none of them are connecting to any folklore. We got to try something new. And then it's good. They're fine, but then it ends up with something that's not as in the spirit of the Halloween movies as we're used to.
Right. So just to touch quickly on a couple of more posts under our YouTube live stream, and then we'll go on to the next franchise. Bill, in response to what you had said that maybe Rob Zombie hopefully hasn't made his best film just yet, someone
Yeah.
posted that it'll be a remake of Werewolf Women of the SS.
Yeah.
I think that would be awesome.
Sign me up. I'm there.
Yeah.
Where do I
And
buy
then-
my ticket?
Exactly. And then in response to how Michael Myers got so huge in prison was calisthenics. Oh boy, manage it.
Yeah, and all that mask making he did in there. He had like
Yeah.
the materials to make masks in prison, which was an interesting. That must have been his therapy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's another element of that movie that I liked was that he would make masks to hide himself. He couldn't
Yeah.
reveal his inner self. He always had to hide what he was thinking because he probably just had murderous thoughts all the time. I mean, they showed him killing animals at the beginning, or at least pictures, I think, of that he had taken of killing animals. So I like
Do you
that
th-
element of it. What?
I just random thought that popped in my head. Do you think that Rob Zombie was influenced by the Friday the 13th movies where Jason sort of is big and unstoppable to, you know, when it was Zombie's turn to make Halloween? Do you think that type of thing sort of got into his head and he wanted to make Michael Myers even more like
Probably.
powerful than, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of franchises, you got to compete on that level. Although I did hear that Rob Zombie did not like elements of Carpenter's Halloween. He did not like the fact that there was very little about Michael Myers and it all focused on Jamie Lee Curtis and her friends. And that's why he flipped it for his movie, because he wanted to get into the head of Michael Myers and, you know, delve into his backstory without really giving him a motive per se, but just expanding the backstory.
Yeah, I didn't think his interpretation and stuff was bad or anything. And like you said, it didn't really give him a good motive. He just there was just bad people around him that at some point you were like, okay, you may or may not have deserved that one. And then it gets worse. And then we see Danny Trejo, who's really nice to him, and then Danny Trejo gets killed. And that is kind of I think the turning point in the movie, because up until that point, everyone who gets attacked, save the nurse, really didn't deserve it. So up until like Danny Trejo, where we actually like him as, you know, as an audience on a surface level, we're like, okay, he's really nice to him, cool. And there's no mercy anymore. You're like, okay, this is now Michael Myers. We are now escaping and getting into the real world. But I did think the mask thing was also really cool because it gave a level of mythology, which but not really. But it also gave this like nod to 4, 5, and 6 and Halloween 3. So I enjoyed that, and I like that it didn't come up again.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up Halloween there, and we're going to move on to the next franchise, which is a particular favorite of mine, Friday the 13th. And the first movie was Friday the 13th, came out in 1980, directed by Sean Cunningham, starring Betsy Palmer and Adrian King. A quick synopsis of the plot: a group of camp counselors trying to reopen a summer camp called Crystal Lake, which has a grim past, are stalked by a mysterious killer. So, I saw this in the movie. Actually, I saw it at the drive-in with my parents. As we mentioned before, it did borrow heavily from Bay of Blood from 1971. And then real quick, I'm just going to go down the list of the Friday the 13th films, and then we'll jump into at least talking about the first one and then moving on. So the first one is from 1980. Part 2 came out in 81. Part 3 was 82. Part 4, the final chapter, was in 84. But no, it didn't end there, because in part 5 we had A New Beginning. And then part 6 in 1986 was Jason Lives. Part 7 was The New Blood in 1988. And part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, or does he, in 1989. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, yet again, in 93. Jason X came out in 2002. Then we had Freddy versus Jason in 2003. And we're not going to really talk about it, but I just want to let people know there actually was a TV series out there. I remember watching it when it first came out. It basically just took the name of the show, had nothing to do with the movie. I'm sorry, took the name of the film, had nothing to do with the films. That came out in 2000. I'm sorry, in 87 to 1990. And I accidentally skipped over the remake with Jared Padalecki in 2009.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So, Mike, why don't you go first? Tell us your experience with Friday the 13th films. Maybe touch on the first one if you remember it.
My memories are all a blur. I never did any drugs, but in my life, but I don't remember a hell of a lot. I'm sure most of my introductions to horror movies over the years were from you, because I was vaguely interested, but not that interested. And you were like, "Oh, you haven't seen this one? You got to see it." So, but I remember being surprised when I found out that, well, I don't know if I guess
I was just going to say,
can we do spoilers?
Folks at home, the movie is what, 40 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
If you haven't seen Friday the 13th, there's going to be spoilers. So,
right. Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
Warning. When I found out that the killer in the first movie was actually Jason's mom, and I think I had already seen a couple of the subsequent movies prior to finding that out. And then you told me, and I was like, what? And then we went back and watched the first one again. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, we never see him until the end or whatever. I didn't see all of them. I definitely didn't see all of them. I remember seeing part of Jason X. Jason X is a nice, mindless, there's really no point to it. It's just, smash and stab. I remember trying to sit through Jason Takes Manhattan when I was in high school or whenever that was. I went to see it. I worked at the movie theater and I was like, let's go in. And then about 20 minutes in, I looked at my friend and I was like, let's go do something else. So I saw the remake and I thought it was okay. No, you know what? I liked the remake. I just thought it had a different feel. I don't know. He just becomes Jason so fast, and there's no, I guess by that point everybody knew about the original and whatnot. But I know you and I, Roger, in the summer one time when I was up visiting you guys at the cabin that you rented, the two of us snuck out one night, or just went out one night, and we saw Freddy versus Jason in the
Yes.
the little cinema they had in the thing. And I remember we didn't speak to each other at all through the whole movie. We were so focused on it. And then as soon as it ended and the credits rolled, we looked at each other and simultaneously said, that was awesome. I mean, I think we were both just really in the mood for that on that day. When you watch it later, it's like, oh, well, I can see where that wasn't so great. And that was kind of corny. And why did they do that? But at that time, on that night, we were just so into it, and it was a big thing. But other than that, yeah, I don't really. I haven't seen all of them. That's for sure. So
cool, Bill.
Oh, I was checking to see if we were still showing on YouTube.
Yep, it's still there. I see it.
Friday the 13th. What was your question about the entire franchise or just the remake?
No, start from the beginning. Your experience. When did you first see the first one? And then, you can go down the list like Mike just did.
Yeah. Well, the original was another one of those event films when I was young. I was 10 when the original Friday the 13th came out. And Halloween, of course, was the reason that Friday the 13th got made. The success of Halloween, I should say.
Right.
We were talking earlier about exploitation films. Halloween was sort of, it was an exploitation film, but it was a labor of love made by people who were really interested in making a great movie. Friday the 13th was definitely a cash in. It was literal, and the people who made it have acknowledged that. Sean Cunningham said, we were just going to remake Halloween and set it somewhere else and like focus on the gory murders. And so in that way, it is its own film because it's intended that the shock sequences were going to be the big selling point of this movie. And Friday the 13th really was a game changer. There were a lot of slasher type films that came out before that. Probably the thing that I can think of the most that is like a Friday the 13th film, other than Bay of Blood, which we already discussed. But we mentioned Black Christmas. And Black Christmas was made in 1974 by Bob Clark, who made A Christmas Story and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Porky's. He had a really varied film career. Bob Clark made that film in 1974, but a lot of the visual cues are very much like Halloween. I mean, other than there's another movie, A Touch of Evil, Orson Welles film from 1957, I think that was made. There's a very long, unbroken camera point of view shot in Touch of Evil.
That's great.
And that was what inspired John Carpenter to do the opening of Halloween, that long, unbroken first-person camera shot. But that sort of became a trope in slasher films too, like this peering at people from the camera. And Bob Clark did that first in Black Christmas. So there's a lot of shots of the killer watching the intended victims and from a closet or wherever he was hiding. There's a lot of that going on, peering into windows. So that was a predecessor for sure for Friday the 13th, because Friday the 13th, again, pumped that up. We get numerous killer point of view shots in Friday the 13th, because until the end of the movie, you don't know who the killer is. And it tries to keep the killer's identity a secret, which it does very well because she's not a character until it's time for her to be revealed as the killer.
Who could it be?
It's not really a mystery. But that movie was one of the most talked about things. Halloween was, and then all of a sudden in my school, everybody was talking about Friday the 13th and what an awesome movie this was and how scary it was. And it didn't disappoint. Like the first time I saw it, I thought it was really scary. But I saw it on HBO. I did not see it theatrically. I guess it was 1981. I had to wait until, these theatrical films were on HBO, and that was usually a year after they were released.
Right.
So I had a delayed reaction to a lot of these films. But I remember when they were current and there was ads galore in the newspaper for Friday the 13th. I mean, Paramount Pictures picked it up. It was an independently made film. And it was one of those things where eventually they cut a deal with Paramount Pictures to distribute this movie. And that was major because it was an independently produced film. The money was put up by the guys who ran Hallmark Releasing. Remember the people I told you who retitled Bay of Blood, Last House Part 2?
Right.
They're the ones that financed Friday the 13th, the original film.
Oh, okay.
They were a sub distributor out of Boston, and they were associated with American International Pictures, which were a huge distributor at that time in the 1970s, dating back to the 50s. So they were the ones that put up the money for Friday the 13th. And apparently they took that money and ran because Hallmark Releasing, I think, didn't do anything after Friday the 13th. So they made enough money off of it, but they got Paramount to put it out, and it opened wide nationwide, and everybody was in theaters seeing this, and suddenly it was a phenomenon. It was making millions at the box office, and that was what really kicked the door down for all of these slasher imitations. But those movies were considered reprehensible in their day. There was a lot of critical backlash, and Friday the 13th, the first couple of movies, they were really looked down on. Respectable people weren't supposed to like Friday the 13th of the series. That's one of my takeaways about the whole series, and especially the first couple of films. But towards the end of the series, horror became a much bigger cultural influence, and suddenly Jason was sort of like this character that everybody looked forward to seeing in the next movie. And oh yeah, he wears a hockey mask and he has a machete. It just turned into that kind of thing. And I was like, we were supposed to be afraid of Jason. Like that was supposed to be something scary that you didn't want to see. And it was the opposite happened. Like he
Yeah,
became sort of
because
like the center of it.
I think Roger said at the beginning when he was like doing the definition of horror slasher movies that a lot of times the killer is the one who's the protagonist, or the reason you go to see it is because you're rooting for the killer to some degree because
Yeah.
like you want that character, you identify with him instead of the victims.
Oh yeah. So Bill, anything else you want to say about the Friday the 13th films?
The remake, or did you see the remake?
Yeah, I saw the remake theatrically, and I thought it was okay while I was watching it. I never thought about it again. I was like, oh, it was a well-made movie, but it was just literally the same old stuff recycled. It didn't bring anything new to the table other than the changes it made to the story. But the story, I mean, who cares about in a Friday the 13th film? You're there to be frightened and to have these like extended stalk and slash sequences. And it was
Right.
very workmanlike, the sequel. What was another one of those movies? Marcus Nispel directed that, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
And one of these guys that came from music videos. And that's what I hate about modern horror movies in general. The Texas Chainsaw remake he did. It was sort of like watching a music video, and there were so many fast cuts, you kind of lost track of what was happening on camera. That Grand Guignol style of Friday the 13th, where somebody got an axe in the face, and the camera just sort of like lingered on this victim for a while. Those things happen in like a split second in the remakes and modern horror films. So that's kind of disappointing for me. I want a show. I want a spectacle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Spency, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a couple decades behind on this on this phenomena, but I grew up with all of them, so I kind of saw them all intermittently. I saw them all at different times. I would see one. I think I had seen like I had seen Jason, not Jason, part 6. I'd seen part 6 like way before I saw part 4 or part 2. Just because that was the one that my dad wanted to watch. So we had stuff like I had stuff like that, but I have seen all of them at least once, and I will always I'm a diehard Godzilla fan, so I will always resent people who are like, I just go see this to just watch giant monsters throw down. I'm like, that is not. I hate that. So I don't like that critique in slasher films either, because I do go to see a good story, and I see it as like a slasher films as like a like you are rooting for the antagonist. You are. We're all what was it? Part 9, Jason was part 9 Jason Takes Manhattan.
No, that was 8.
What the
Nine was
Jason Goes to Hell. When he finally shows up at the end, we're all kind of cheering a little bit because we're finally like, yes, this is what we wanted. We finally get to see it. And don't get me wrong, there's some great choices and some great kills, but we finally get Jason, and that satisfaction is very ironic because he is the killer of the whole franchise. So I love the slasher genre for that, but I also enjoy a satisfying finishing of the killer. I loved all of them. I loved Jason X. I loved Jason. Jason Takes Manhattan is probably like weaker for me, but it really wasn't all that bad. Part 6 was great. Part 5 was part 5. It was good, but like you said, that one didn't break the mold at all. Part 4 was pretty great because it had excellent story. I think that one is on par with the first one because of the story. Part 2 is pretty good. 3 is a little less so, but I still think they're all really good. Jason X I think is great, and Freddy vs. Jason has a special place in my childhood because I love both of them. So that to me is just fantastic. And the remake is one of my favorite Friday the 13th films because of how different it is. And I like Agile Jason. I like scary because he will run after you. They break some of the tropes with, okay, he's not just walking after everybody and they trip and they fall. You know what I mean? We have characters we like.
A few thing.
Yeah. We have characters we like, but characters we don't like. And some characters you're like, damn, that guy was a dick, but did he really deserve the arrow in the back of the head? Did she really deserve to get hit by a boat? I don't know about that one. So I enjoyed that. And one of my favorite kills in the entire franchise is when the cop shows up. They call the cop. They called the cops. He shows up. He's like, what can I do? And as soon as the like he's about to talk to somebody, Jason jumps down from the rooftop and fire pokers him through the face. And the shot goes right through. You see one side, the doorway passes by, and you see the other side of everyone else freaking out from what just happened. And I thought that was a fantastically done kill. Just as good as the one with the couple in the bed, the dude in the bed, in I think it was part 3, when Jason's under the bed and you see his hand come up and he sticks it through the bed, through the guy's neck or something.
That's in the
Kevin
first
Bacon,
one.
Part 1, yeah.
Was that part 1?
Yeah, that was Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon got spiked through the throat. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was Kevin.
It's
Bacon.
okay though. He was stoned, so he went out happy.
Probably didn't feel much. Yeah.
I remember that one. I love those kills. So I think that the remake had a lot of merit to it, and I'm so sad that it got caught in the legal crossfires of what's been going on with the Friday the 13th franchise and all that stuff, because that's why we haven't seen any of the new movies, is this like legal battles up the wazoo that apparently are being solved. They released a video game, Friday the 13th, the game, which me and my friends absolutely adore, and it's a great like homage to the stuff that goes on in the movies, and the way the game plays is very well done, and it feels just like the movies, as you're running around as Jason and running around as the counselors trying to escape, and Jason doesn't run, he doesn't, but when he gets you, then you're screwed and all this stuff. So there's a lot of good things I thought came out of the franchise, and part of what makes the later ones good is when they break the mold, and also what makes them bad is when they break the mold.
Right.
Oh man, yeah. Friday the 13th for me, it's I love the Friday the 13th films, with a couple of exceptions I'll go into. But I saw the first one in 1980 in the back of my parents' car at the drive-in, and it just at that point there was no Jason, so there was no preconceived notions. It was just a goddamn scary movie, and I hid in the back seat and I loved it. Then part 2 came along, and it was Jason with the potato sack on his head, or pillowcase, however you want to look at it. But I loved that one too, because that all of a sudden now you've got this character in the movies, and in the sequel, and he's terrifying. I mean, there's a scene where these people find his nasty old little shack that he slapped together with, bits and pieces of stuff. And he's got this disgustingly awful toilet. That's probably why I have a phobia of public bathrooms. And there's a shot where the characters are in the building, and I think it was the sheriff or something is in the building, and there's a window behind him, and you could see Jason coming up running to the house. And I just remember this lady. I vividly remember this lady in the theater just screamed at the top of her lungs when you saw his head coming. And so I think for me, the first 3 and maybe 4 were it was part of the experience of seeing them in the theater, which with the audience. Part 3 was in 3D, and I love that movie. I just watched it recently again with my grandson. Actually, we watched 2 and 3 back to back. And part 3 was in 3D. And when we saw that in the theater, that was sort of in the middle of the 80s craze where 3D was trying to make a comeback. And there's a scene where Jason grabs this dude's head and he crushes it, and the guy's face is facing the camera and his eyeball pops out. And I remember sitting there in the theater, and the audience ahead of me, it was like a wave from the front to the back of people going, ah, because the eyeball was in their lap.
That's awesome.
That's why I really love those movies. It's not necessarily for the story. I mean, part of it's for the kills. I love, like the poor dude in the wheelchair gets the machete and he goes down the stairs, or the guy walking upside down gets sliced in half. There's just so many cool kills. And then part 4 was good. I think as a kid, was what, 14 when that came out. So could identify with Tommy Jarvis, and he was into horror. I kind of wanted to be able to make masks like him. I never did, but I always thought that was cool. And then you had the dude that was looking for his sister, who had obviously been killed by Jason. And you thought he was going to put up a good fight against Jason, and it didn't last long. I wish that fight had gone on longer in that movie when him and Jason kind of go at it in the basement. Then you get part 5. I didn't really care for that one because it wasn't Jason. It was the ambulance driver that went nuts because another guy killed his son or something. Part 6 is widely considered as one of the best movies. I mean, I loved that movie. I remember seeing that in the theater too. And when Tommy Jarvis has, he needs catharsis. He needs to go and truly make sure that Jason is dead. So he digs him up, of course, with Horshack from Welcome Back, Kotter, sticks a metal pole in him. And then, of course, a lightning storm hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's about to come alive. And at that point, the series changes because now Jason's been reanimated, and he had maggots eating his face, and now he's alive. We could talk in depth at length about these movies and say that, well, maybe at that point his body starts to regenerate a little bit, but that's a tangent I don't think we'll go on. But Jason comes back, and then because Tommy had the hockey mask, he tosses it on, which he doesn't get the hockey mask till part 3. And then that was just a fun, wild ride. It suffered from being an 80s film. I mean, it has a great Alice Cooper soundtrack. But you get, again, it's another one where most of the cast you don't really care about. So when they get killed off.
Isn't that the one where Jason ended up destroying the RV and he's standing on top of it?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that scene. I think part 6 is awesome specifically because up until this point, even Nightmare on Elm Street was when did Nightmare on Elm Street 1 come out? That was later.
84. Yeah, 84.
This was so this was soon after that with being in 86, and it no longer became who is the killer or what are we going to do about it. It became this, how do you stop this? He's now reanimated. He's no longer a person. The rules have changed. The game is different. And I enjoyed what part 6 did for just the whole franchise and the slasher genre in general. Is it became this, we no longer have a person on the loose killing people. He's no longer a serial killer. He's an unstoppable monster. And you can't just write that off as, oh, well, you just need enough guys with guns because now guns are loosely useful. Right. So I really enjoyed that. And then the way they end up defeating him in later movies is really enjoyable. And I think that also becomes a staple of the slasher genre, is defeating the main antagonist in a satisfying and creative way, because they finally wrap the chain around him and send him back into the water. They do all kinds of stuff to him, and I love that. I enjoyed that. That to me is what makes Friday the 13th so fun, is that it's a different death every time. He gets the axe to the head in part 3, and then Tommy loses his mind for a quick second in part 4. In part 6 he's put down in the water and all that stuff. That to me makes the genre better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then we move on to part 7, The New Blood, which it's not that good of a movie. I remember really enjoying it when it came out, but that was only because his opponent in this, the protagonist in this, is a girl with telekinesis. And it's just one of those films that leaves you disappointed because it could have been so much more. They don't really have a battle till the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the film. And it could have been just so much better. I do fondly remember that. I haven't revisited it recently, but I liked that element. You've already got the supernatural element of Jason's basically a zombie now, or he's back from the dead somehow. So why not introduce a psychic power like telekinesis? But and that'll actually tie into a criticism I have of Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which we'll get to in a little bit. But so that was The New Blood. Then Jason Takes Manhattan. I'm sorry.
They shouldn't have called it that.
But Jason kills everyone on a cruise, and then and he stops by Times Square for 5 minutes.
Yes, and you're right. Part of what makes that movie pretty good to me, and it's low on my list, but I still like it, is the end when he gets melted or something by all the toxic waste and stuff like that. I thought that was cool because it was a very urban way to kill him. This is the first time we've seen Jason in anywhere that's not rural, backwoods summer camp. So
Right.
it's terrifying. We're like, he's not going to be stopped until they end up stopping him with I think it was the toxic waste. And I enjoyed that. I thought that was really cool. And I'm like, save the rest of the movie, which could be a different movie.
It's probably due to budgetary reasons, because you walk in with the expectation that, all right, now he's going to be in New York City. What the fuck is going to happen? And I'm sure there's a parallel Earth out there somewhere where it's an amazing film and he's just shredding the city to pieces.
Yeah. The psychic girl, and a couple other like smaller things are things I would like to see done with 21st century graphical power. Because we have the remake is good, but the remake takes the best parts of the first 4 movies. There are really good ideas used in later films that don't end up going anywhere because of the limitations for a variety of limitations. But
right,
the stuff that I would want to see expanded upon now.
Yeah. So quickly moving on, because we've got a whole another franchise to talk about. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. They got to stop, first of all, putting final into these movie titles.
I know, right? Yeah.
We already had a final.
This is the last one until
we swear.
Yeah, this time.
Unless this does really well, in which case it will not be the last
right.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I think this and Jason Takes Manhattan, I ended up going by myself to see it because I couldn't get anybody else to go with me. I really enjoyed the shit out of this movie. Except, again, it was a bit of a letdown because you don't see Jason till the last 15, 20 minutes of the film. And that, like you said, Spence, when he showed up in the theater, we were like cheering. Finally, here he is, And they stole from Halloween 4, where he was homing in on his relatives. They stole from the movie The Hidden, where he was a creature that was body hopping. And it was just like they didn't need to do that. They could have come up with something different. However, I like the fact that the guy who was the main character on the TV series at the time was the main character in this movie. He was a different character, but the same actor was in it. And of course, that very ending where Jason's hockey mask is in the dust and Freddy's glove comes up and pulls him down, and that's when you were like, oh my god, like all of a sudden your mind in the audience just kind of explodes.
That was the Nick Fury moment.
Yes.
The idea that these two things could coexist in the same universe. Like prior to that, every movie was like in a separate universe, and I think for the most part, and then for that moment to be like so unexpected, like holy shit.
Well, and up to that point, Paramount owned the rights to Friday the 13th, and it was then they sold it to New Line Cinema, which had already produced the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So that's why they were able to do the crossover.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I loved that, and if you get rid of like the body hopping section of part 9, it's a really enjoyable movie because the first 10 minutes when like the girl goes to Camp Crystal Lake and in our brains we're like, okay, she's getting stalked by Jason. Does she know? Okay, cool. She starts running. That's cool. Really enjoyable. All right, this is gonna be the first kill. This is gonna set the mood. And then all the dudes with guns come out and they blow them to bits.
Yes.
And I remember watching that, losing it. I'm like, this is the beginning of the movie, not the end. So I was like, this is really, really cool. And then I felt like it had some creative issues, but I loved the what they were going for. And then at the end, when he comes back, there's some really enjoyable fighting moments, and he gets some really, really hardcore kills in there, and we're all really, really excited to see a slasher movie.
Right. And then Rufus from Supernatural comes in and gives you some exposition about it. It takes a Voorhees to kill a Voorhees,
How did he know that?
I know. That's one thing I walked away from that movie going, wait a minute, where did he get all his plot information from?
It was in the script.
Yeah, right. Somebody wrote it.
That opening sequence that you mentioned, though, too, is great because they fake you out because you think it's the typical, the chick taking a shower and now Jason's going to attack her and she's running from him. But it turns out she's an FBI agent. She falls on the ground and reaches under a rock and pulls a gun out and starts shooting at him, and it's like that twist was a really great way to set up the film. It's just too bad some of it fell a little flat.
Yeah, I think it would have been better if they had a few body hops and then Jason shows up and he got away and now we have to deal with him. I don't
Right.
know.
Bill, do you recall Jason Goes to Hell?
No, I think I only ever saw it one time.
Oh, okay.
And I've been letting you guys talk about this series the most because I really don't like any of the Friday the 13th movies, and except for like the first couple. Like I
Yeah.
love the first two. I think they're actually scary movies.
Yeah.
3, I think, was like my limit. It was so cartoonish and like it had like the world's unbikerest bikers in it. It was like they were like fake movie bikers, and it's kind of like fake punk rockers in movies, like where they have spiky hair and listen to synth pop on a boombox. That's a punker in movies, and so that's what that seemed like to me. I thought it was kind of jokey, and I do love how over the top the final chapter is, and Crispin Glover's dancing skills. You
Yeah.
can't say anything bad about that. But yeah, I don't know. I really didn't like any other Friday the 13th movies until Jason X. I thought that one was really funny. I thought it was definitely a spoof.
Yeah.
It was very spoofy when it was going on.
I like Jason X. Jason X
It's good.
much like Jason Goes to Hell, the real value in it are the few choices they made but didn't expand upon, and then there are a couple of incredibly creative kills. Because in part 9, the dude who like melts and like you see him fall apart, that I thought that was incredibly graphic and a very enjoyable thing to watch. And then in part X, they had the girl, he like stuck her face in the liquid nitrogen and then slammed her head down and shattered. And
That was
I love
fucking
that.
awesome. Yeah.
I love that.
That movie is like a guilty pleasure. It's like, this is stupid, but it's awesome. Like,
yeah. See, that's my kind of film.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to revisit Jason X because I saw it once in the theater and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And although I do know that it, whoever wrote it was inspired by the fact that when John Carpenter was interviewed once and they said, "Would you ever go back to the Michael Myers franchise?" And he said, "Well, only if they launch him onto a space station or something." And so it's part of the rumor mill, but I had heard that that's what they inspired them to make Jason X, because it takes place way in the future, and this team comes back to Earth and finds his body, I guess, in the ice or something, and thaws him out, and he's on the space station.
Jason X had another purpose though. They could not decide on a freaking script for Freddy versus Jason. They could not decide. They got like 5 or 6 options. They kept looking through them, kept denying them, couldn't figure it out. They had to make Jason X so that way there wasn't like a 7-year gap between movies and interest waned. There was like a 3-year gap between movies. They're like, okay, we'll make Jason X. This will be fine. And it it was an enjoyable slasher film and it got people interested. And I think calling it Jason X makes perfect sense. And I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because Jason X becomes a whole like character essentially later on. I thought that was really enjoyable.
He was a mighty duck.
But then later on, they had to do that so that way they could make Freddy versus Jason and actually have people who remembered the franchise.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about that right now, Freddy versus Jason. And we could probably do a whole show just on that film alone. So I'm going to be real brief and just say, I friggin' love that movie. When I saw that in the theater, I was blown away. I loved it. It delivered everything I wanted to see, and they were able to take the Freddy mythology and the Jason mythology and kind of mesh them together into one story. And like the whole scene in the cornfield where he catches on fire and he's walking through the corn maze on fire, chasing after he slaughtered about half a dozen people at the kids at this party.
Jason or Freddy?
Jason. Yeah, he's like on fire with the machete on fire, and there's so many great scenes. There's a scene where there's the deputy who the same actor that played the kid in Lethal Weapon 4, where he's like 21 today, sir, and sure enough, 10 minutes later he got shot dead. He was like the deputy in this movie, and he's fighting Jason in this lab or something, and Jason grabs the kid's chest and slams his hand into the computer machine and electrocutes him using his body as a conductor. I love that. There's so many moments.
I need to watch that again. I need to watch that again.
Just the fight at the end. The only problem is I felt like they hedged their bets so much. They didn't want
Yeah.
to give a clear-cut winner.
Because they know they got fans of both
right.
going to see the movie, and some of them are rooting for Jason, some are rooting for Freddy, and like they can't.
I thought they did a fantastic job. The only thing I didn't like about the movie was the whole like Jason's afraid of water thing. I'm like, all right, you kind of got a weakness there because that's not really in conjunction with the rest of the franchise. But besides that, we get a really enjoyable time because we get to see Jason do his kills, but then we also have a clear explanation of why he's not rampaging across the town. It's because he's controlled by Freddy. But then they go into the dream world and Freddy knocks him around until Freddy gets pulled into the regular world, and now he has to go toe to toe with Jason, who now has the upper hand.
Yeah.
Even though Freddy puts up a fantastic fight.
Oh yeah.
I was surprised.
I enjoyed that Freddy was smart because Freddy's the only slasher of the big three that really talks. Like Scream kind of talks, but they're in their own category. I love Freddy and I love watching him fight Jason because you get this satisfaction, as well as I thought it was a good story. I thought it was a very well done story, right?
I did too. You
know, yeah, it was very satisfying. It was like the first like blank versus blank that I had really seen. And I could see why they were balancing it. You know, it was before Alien versus Predator or any of that other stuff, you know. So like two things. Well, it wasn't the first. I mean, they had Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and stuff like that in the past.
Yes, thank you.
Like, this was
so good.
In my lifetime, it was like the first thing I had seen like that where they crossed over, and it was satisfying because they were both getting in some really good hits, and then, you know, at the end it seemed like it had been decided, but then not, and it was just so. It was just totally so satisfying. Yeah.
The dream sequences in that movie also, I think, were enough to make all the Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street fans happy. But then the Friday the 13th kills, like Jason going on a rampage, awesome. We enjoy it, but we've seen that before. And then we get to see Freddy stalk a few people and kill them. And it's like, we get the satisfaction of both. And then at the end, they finally put them together. And that's when you finally have the problem of, oh no, the guard dog's off the leash and he's looking at me.
And, now, to your point, Spencer, though, we had actually never seen Jason go on a rampage like when he attacked that party. Freddy did it, I think, I forget, part two. He attacks a party and slaughters a bunch of kids. But in this one was really the first time Jason went after a group of people at once. And I felt that was kind of satisfying because we had never seen that before.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I love a good rampage and guys you never see it from. You know what I mean? I think it's great. The rampage in part 2 is of Nightmare on Elm Street is pretty crazy for what the franchise was, because Freddy has the least kill count. If you watch all the movies, he has the least amount of people actually killed, because he's so involved in like the fun of the chase. So then when he finally gets into this party and he's just going toe to toe with everybody, and it's just a nightmare for everybody. No pun intended.
Right, hold your Freddy thoughts for a minute. We're going to talk about that just shortly. I just want to end things for Friday the 13th with the remake. I know you all kind of touched on it a little bit. I really love the remake. I love the fact that they took, like you said, Spence, the best moments of the first 4 films and encapsulated it into the beginning. It was about the mother. There were so many elements from those films that they put into it, and they did a lot of subtle things. Like in the original part 3, he's got a crossbow, or a harpoon gun, and he shoots a girl dead in the eye. And you go, was this guy a marksman? Well, in this one, the camera, they don't tell you anything, but the camera's panning across Jason's room, and he's got all these trophies for marksmanship from when he was a kid. Oh, okay.
Huh.
They were very subtle with that. They made him cunning. And as you mentioned, Spence, they made him fast. They borrowed from Texas Chainsaw 2, where he's got this underground lair and, he keeps people hostage. We don't really know why he's holding this girl hostage. It doesn't make any sense.
We do.
Yeah, they explain why.
They explain that. She has the locket. It's the sweater.
That's right. All right, I forgot about that. So
she looks like his mother.
That's right.
Yeah, she's got the locket on. And I enjoyed that. I thought it was all really good. And Also, the beginning of the remake has one of the most horrifying kills ever. It's the girl trapped in the sleeping bag above the fire.
Oh yeah.
That's awful.
That's pretty scary. Yeah.
That is actually terrifying because that's less of like, oh my God, some acid fell on me or some liquid nitrogen hit me. Like, this could happen to you if you're sleeping out in the kid. That's a genuine terrifying thought of you being in the sleeping bag and something like that happening
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
awful.
And another reason I enjoyed the remake was because Jared Padalecki was in it, and
Yeah.
he was still doing Supernatural at the time, so you kind of were hoping that he was gonna, Sam Winchester it a little bit and maybe do a little research and try and take Jason down. He didn't do that, but that would have been nice.
He cussed once
Yeah.
in the movie, and I remember watching the movie. Now I'm a huge Supernatural fan, and I'm like, I see him, and just under his breath, he just goes, "Fuck," really, really quietly. And me and you paused the movie. We're like, "Wait, what did he just say?" We had to
He
rewatch.
never
that
talks like that.
Yeah, caught me off guard there.
I actually remember having a moment of sympathy for Jason at the end of that one because he took the girl because she looked like his mother, and I felt like there was a certain amount of him missing his mom or being a little confused, and he thought she was kind of on his side or that she cared about him or whatever. And then suddenly, of course, he's a murderer, so he has to die. So she kind of turns on him, and at the end, and he gets the chain around his neck. And I remember there's like at least one shot of his eyes where he's kind of like, wait, what? I was like, for a split second, I felt bad for him. I was like, oh man, this poor bastard, and then he gets pissed and he starts fighting back.
Yeah. And that reminded me of part 2 when Amy Steele figures out the mother thing, and she takes them because he's got the head on a table with the candles and her sweater laid out, and she throws the sweater on, fixes her hair to look like the mother, and tries to dupe him, but it fails because she kind of moves to the left and he sees the mother's head behind her and realizes it's not her. But yeah, that had that same element in the remake.
I like that. I enjoyed that a lot, and I personally think the remake is really good. And then one of my other favorite moments is there's a few kills where he just will just snipe somebody with a crossbow and call it a day, and we always enjoyed that. But when there's the two dudes, the comic relief boys, the two stoners, like the real stoners, one of them goes out and gets killed by Jason, and we're like, we kind of we don't love that because I like that guy. Sad.
Yeah, he wasn't doing anything bad. Yeah.
But then his friend goes out to save him. He's like, I'm not going to leave my friend out there. And, Jared Padalecki and the girl are like, oh, that's Danielle Panabaker. I just realized.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I forgot about her because she was in Sky High. That's all what I know her from as a kid. But they're like, no, don't go out there as a killer. And he's like, I'm not going to leave my friend. He goes out there, sees Jason. He actually lands a blow on Jason and then gets away. And Jason picks up the axe and flings it at him. But then instead of just killing him, he left him there. And I'm like, this is a fantastic script writing moment for the franchise. I'm like, they're like, he's moaning for help and stuff like that. And then that's when Jared Padalecki realizes, no, he's bait. Don't do that. And I'm like, yes, smart Jason. Yes.
Yeah. Cunning.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up Friday the 13th. And now we're going to jump over to Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven, starring Robert Englund and Heather Langenkamp. And real quick, the synopsis is teenager Nancy Thompson must uncover the dark truth concealed by her parents after she and her friends become targets of the spirit of a serial killer with a bladed glove in their dreams, which if they die, it kills them in real life. Now, I'm going to take the lead on this and just do a brief synopsis of my own opinion, because I don't really love the Elm Street films, so I have some very short comments to make. I love the first one. I really enjoyed that. Saw that in the theater. The second one I thought was a retread of the first. The Dream Warriors, I started to mention this earlier. The one thing that really pissed me off about that movie is, so these characters realize they can fight Freddy in the dream. One of the kids is a D&D player. His creativity should have allowed him to become so powerful that he could have destroyed Freddy Krueger, or at least put up a good fight. And that was a missed opportunity. They totally dropped the ball on that one. I can't really speak to 4 and 5. I may have seen them. I don't even recall. Freddy's Dead. I don't recall that one either. But New Nightmare I loved. I love seeing John Saxon come back. Heather Langenkamp. I liked that one, that it was based on the premise that the actors in real life who were in the first film are being haunted by Freddy in the real world. So I really enjoyed that one. Of course, Freddy versus Jason we talked about, and then the remake I thought was okay. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I think it's like just seems pointless because the first one is so good. You don't necessarily need to remake it, but they did it with Halloween and Friday the
I
13th. So
I like the remake. I gotta finish it. I barely remember it, but I remember the beginning vividly, and I remember thinking when I was watching the beginning, I'm like, this is really good. Like I was shocked at how good it is. I'm like, this is really scary and enjoyable. And so I like what they were doing overall with that one.
yeah, Spence, why don't you continue with your thoughts on the Elm Street series?
Freddy's my favorite out of the three, and don't get me wrong, I love Michael for what he is, and Jason has a special place. But Freddy's the only person in all these franchises. He's having fun. It's horrible, but he's enjoying himself. And his little wisecracks, they are corny as can be, but I like them. I like watching him. He actually stalks people. There's this like weird relationship that grows. It's no longer just psycho killer and victim. It's this he knows their name. He knows things about them. He talks to them. They talk back to him. And it's creepy. And I think the concept of the dream demon is way super creative. And yeah, the later films, they miss the mark in some cases. The second one is weird to me because it's very, very sexually charged. And then I didn't think it was a retread of the first one on the basis that he's like trying to find this like really weak-willed kid and he's like, kill for me. And I thought that was completely different from the first one. Because in the first one, he was just like coming back and doing his thing and spreading his name around. So I like the concept. I like that they established the mythology, but they also established that because of all of that, there is no sympathy for Freddy. And he is powerful enough that you don't need to worry about, okay, when does Jason come on the screen? Now Jason's here. Now I get to see him kill. Now I get to see the characters I like survive. Now we get the final girl. Because up until that, all of Nightmare on Elm Street in most of the movies, you get a good killer. You get a fun killer, and you get somebody who's no sympathy. I mean, I feel a lot more sympathy for Jason than I do for Freddy for a variety of reasons. And I like that. So I think the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise has a lot of good and a lot of iffy moments, but Freddy's my favorite. So I could go on and on about how much I love him.
I just want to jump back in again real quick and just say that the Freddy giving out the one-liners early on in the franchise, that's what turned me off. I couldn't stand that because it made him not scary to me. But Bill, do you want to take the next go round on Nightmare on Elm Street?
I'm with you. I like the original. I like the second one a lot. Like Spence said, I thought it did do its own thing. It wasn't trying to do the same thing as the original. And at the time, that kind of turned me off, actually. I was like, oh, this isn't like the first one at all. But it just kind of like stayed there. And then I watched it again on home video. I went to see it theatrically, the first two. I was a big fan of the first. I saw it 3 times theatrically, which
Wow.
to me, that was a lot. Now, how many times have I seen it? Oh
Yeah,
my
right.
God. But yeah, it was pretty amazing to see that theatrically. The audience loved it. It was a packed house. Everybody was screaming at I'm talking about 2, the second one. Dream Warriors, everybody loves Dream Warriors. Because I know every time I post an ad from it on the page, everybody chimes in. Dream Warriors seems to be even more popular, at least on my page, than the first 2 films. I liked that Nancy came back, but I hated what they did with her in it. And it's just sort of like you. All of a sudden, Freddy was doing these one-liners and everything, and I didn't think he was scary anymore because he hardly said anything in the first one. He just had a couple lines, and that made him more terrifying. And he was just sort of like he was almost shapeless in the first one because they showed him in shadow a lot, and then like sometimes you'd see his face, and it would be like all not Freddy's face, like that. He pulled his skin off, and it's like large Marge underneath of it. But he was
His
just sort of
arms
like
extend out. Yeah.
That was creepy.
It was like you never really knew what form he was gonna take or what he was gonna be able to do the next time you saw him. But then when the more character they gave him, the more life they gave him, that left little and little to the imagination. And it just sort of, I don't know. I don't hate them. I've seen every single one of these movies, except for the remake. I was like, thanks, but no thanks. I was Freddied out at that point. I was like, okay, enough. It's happened so many times. Uh, but I loved New Nightmare. I thought that was a brilliant idea. And it had been done, and it had actually been done before. And God, now that I said that, I'm not going to be able to remember what movie did it before, but it was a really new concept at the time. This meta sort of thing that we take that for granted because of Scream now. But this was, I think like the year after Scream was New Nightmare.
It could have been. I forget what year Scream was, but it was around that time anyway.
I think Scream was 96.
Okay.
If I'm not
So
mistaken.
New Nightmare was 94.
Oh, okay. So it was before Scream.
Yeah.
Um,
It was Wes Craven returning like Carpenter did.
yeah. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I liked the explanation that they gave for Freddy, that it didn't really have anything to do with Freddy at all. There was something else behind that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me. But the other ones like Freddy or after Dream Warriors, Dream Master, Dream Child, Freddy's Dead, they're all about the same to me. They had great visuals, but the character of Freddy had lost all of its appeal to me at that point.
I have to say, in Dream Warriors, the funniest moment for me was in the theater. Nancy is with these other characters, and they're in this dream world, and a door appears hovering in the air above them, and she looks at it and goes, "It's a door." And everyone, you were there with me, Mike. I think.
Yeah.
Everyone in the audience was like, "No, duh."
They were like, "Hey, good job." I'm like, who wrote the script? Like, the people would just say, "It's a door," instead of like, "Where does this lead to?" Or, or just not say anything. Yeah.
And I just want to quickly clarify my opinion about part 2. Was formed after I first saw it, so I'm gonna have to revisit that film because Spence has kind of talked it up quite a bit, and I really only remember vague bits and pieces of it. But excuse me one second.
It's a little more than that, I think it's a little more than it appears to be the first time you see it. There are all sorts of subtexts to that movie that really are. It seems like there's more going on under the surface.
Interesting.
Yeah, I remember part 2 having more subtext than the first one for a variety of topics. It was a little bit more because we were a little bit more involved with the main character since Freddy was trying to like recruit him in a weird way. So since that was part of the plot, so we got a little bit more of this like character falling apart, kind of subtext versus trying to figure out who Freddy is, what Freddy is, how do we stop him, what do we do. And in New Nightmare, which is fantastic, the scene where I think it's whoever it was, gets pulled to the ceiling and like she's like goes up the wall and is racked on the ceiling. I was like horrified at that, and I saw that as like a teenager where I wasn't just a little kid. Like I was like, that was scary.
They did that in the original too.
Yeah.
That originally when I saw that scared the bloody piss out of me.
Wow.
And you couldn't see him at all.
Did you see it in a theater?
I don't think I saw the first one in the theater. No.
Oh, okay. Damn. I feel really old.
I saw it in the theater. I think we're all, except for Spencer, we're all around the same age.
My mom wouldn't let me near anything that was horror related, and it wasn't until I got older and started hanging around with Roger Moore that not Roger Moore, but hanging around with Roger Space Moore.
I want to pretend you meant Roger Moore.
Roger Moore. I started hanging around with Roger Moore.
Yeah, I'm Roger Less.
We were buddies. Yeah.
Roger Medium.
We didn't mean that.
No.
So, Mike, continue. Any further thoughts on the series?
I am like Spencer. Freddy is just my favorite, but I think it's not that the movies were that good. It's just the idea of Freddy that I love. And the first movie is it for me, you know, like, and New Nightmare was very good. And there's been bits and pieces here and there since that were fine. But yeah, it's exactly like Bill was saying. He's just not scary after the first one. He jokes around a little too much, and they show him in his face and everything in full light so often that it's not scary anymore. It looks like a mask. It doesn't look like burned flesh anymore. It's just like, oh, that's his face.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Some of the later movies, they kind of, when they realize like, okay, cool, we've revealed the killer now, there's not a lot we can do. I remember some of the moments being this like, are we in the dream world scenario? And
yeah,
is the scene we're seeing real? How, when does it fall apart? Is Freddy lurking around every corner and watching every detail?
right.
And I enjoyed that. I really did. I enjoyed sitting there thinking, I remember sitting in my chair through a couple of scenes, and I'm sitting there like, oh, this might not be real. This might be a dream. And it took me a little while afterwards to realize that was the horror they were going for, was the reality bending one versus the shapeless killer, which was awesome.
I like that uncertainty. That was a good aspect.
Yeah, not knowing, right, is this a dream or not? And even if it is, there's a chance that, there was a few times where the person woke up and like, it seemed like there was like a lingering injury, or like she grabbed his hat at one point and it came through into the real world with her. And I liked there was a little ambiguity there of like, well, wait a minute now, how far does his power extend, and
I love
like in
that.
the first movie, there's the part where he comes down through the ceiling, and I remember watching that and thinking, wait, is she dreaming this, or is he
she wasn't dreaming at that point,
or is he like on top of her because she's about to dream, like.
The friend at his house when he gets pulled into the bed. That was like, that happened in the real world. That wasn't a dream. So I thought that was a really rough kill.
I think it's unclear though, because she tells him to stay awake, and then he falls asleep with his headphones on, and then it's like, it looks like he wakes up, but people also have dreams where they wake up and they're still in the dream, and it's ambiguous. Yeah,
they did that in Freddy vs. Jason too, where there was a couple of kills where it got to a point where the person who was being stalked by Freddy was now awake and still suffering injuries in the dream world, and it became this like pseudo sleep paralysis that they were experiencing. And there was almost like this, you started to tell that there was this tipping point for every person, where at what point does Freddy just control everything and you're screwed? I enjoyed that. I enjoyed trying to find that, because I remember one of the worst ones was the one of the dudes in Freddy vs. Jason who had escaped the mental hospital because they were like believing in Freddy and all that stuff. He was like he was begging somebody else to wake him up, and it's kind of this like sleep paralysis horror kind of deal. It's like very relatable horror for quite a few people. So I thought that was an enjoyable way to make Freddy scary without having to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. I did want to mention again too about the remake, which I actually don't remember a lot of it, but I remember at first being upset that it wasn't Robert Englund again. I felt that he was still young enough; he could still have played the part. But that being said, I do love Jackie Earle Haley as an actor, and I thought he was really good in the part, especially at the beginning where they're chasing him and he's going, "I didn't do it, and for a split second, you kind of feel bad for him. You're like, what if he really is innocent? And then the parents fucking burned him to death. And that's why he becomes this demonic creature.
That would have been a great origin. That he got falsely accused and burned to death when he didn't do anything. And then somehow his spirit, because of the unresolved thing or whatever, his rage allowed him to sort of come back in some form. And then he created the glove after that, and then came after everybody for what they did to him, instead of it being, he used the glove to fuck with the kids and torture them, and then when they killed him, he kept doing what he was doing before. Like, I accepted that in the original movie. I was like, all right, whatever. And then in the remake, there was that moment where you're like, wait, did he really do it or did he not do it? And then, as Spence said about the second one, there was this like almost forget how you put it, Spence, like kind of erotic thing. And it's like in the remake, there's a moment where I'm like, wait, did he molest these girls, or was he just keeping them, was he just trying to scare them, or
they kept it ambiguous, I think, on purpose. It was left up to our imagination as the audience. But the one thing too, last thing I want to comment about the remake was that his makeup job, I remember reading about it when the movie came out, and they were like, well, we wanted to make him look as realistic as possible. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but because it's so realistic, it's very hard to look at. I prefer pizza face Freddy from the other films than an actually realistic looking, like a person who's a real burn victim, because that just disturbs me and makes me feel sad.
Yeah, I think that was kind of their goal, though, was it no longer became this like cheesy 80s thing. It was this like supernatural tale of like, child killer becomes demon. And one of my favorite parts of Freddy that is loosely talked about is, unlike Jason and Michael, where Michael kind of kills intermittently, and there's like a couple of movies where he goes after his family members and stuff like that. Jason is like territorial almost. Freddy is creepy because he specifically targets teens and kids. And if you think about it, the teens and kids didn't kill him. They didn't burn him to death. It was the parents. He could have easily invaded their dreams and tried to kill them. He did not do that. He took it out on their kids, which is significantly worse and much more malicious than just being territorial or just being a psychotic killer in general, which to me makes him that much. It makes it that much more satisfying when we see him defeated and see him killed. Like, yes, you actually had it coming. There's no ambiguity about it. I'm like, I enjoyed that. And I also think Freddy tends to be a bit more juiced up in sense of power. Whereas like Jason is like scary because people are miscommunicating and like, okay, I didn't know there was a killer out, so now I'm going to get killed. Whereas Freddy, a lot of the Freddy movies, they tend to figure out that he's there. And there's tend to be groups of people who figure out that Freddy's a threat, but he's still a threat. There's no longer a way to like easily prepare yourself.
And and the thing I love about with Freddy is the threat is always there. You can't not sleep for more than a couple of days, right? You have to sleep at some point. And if he wants to get you, he's going to get you at some point. Like you can't, there's no way to, avoid that. But I like what Bill said earlier about the first movie. I can watch just love the first movie is fucking scary. And he's scary in that. He's almost like a little bit angry. There's a little bit more, not like crazy psycho angry, but just like there's a little bit more hatred and anger in him in that movie than in the later ones. And like Spence said, it's good to see him having fun and stuff. And he's having fun, but I wish they had blended that with him being a little more like evil, like, a little bit more make him scary. And the formlessness that Bill talked about, because you're just like, how far does his power extend? Is he controlling the whole world? Even Spence said this, or is he just like a something that, when you're in the dream, he's pretty much nothing he can't do. But I don't know. I just thought like, not that I wanted them to define the limits of his power at all, but I just felt like the first one is so much darker and nastier. And then after a while they started, I think they was like the Freddy had his little shtick, and that was what they wanted to make the character into, like going forward. Like the one-liners, people started to expect them. And it was like, Bill was talking about Jason, how after a certain point it was hockey mask machete, and that's Jason. And I almost feel like they did that for marketing purposes or like merchandising or something, like
that has a lot to do with it. The merchandising. I mean, the films themselves, they're just products that are made to fit this mold that's been profitable in the past. And that's sort of like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like too old and bitter when I say that I don't like the remakes and the sequel, because, but to me, these films mean a lot to me because I can remember where I was when these movies became a thing. And there's a lot of things that I just sort of let go of in the past for newer stuff, for different things that I overlooked from that era. because I was so fixated on Michael Myers, Freddy, all of the franchise stuff, you know, John Carpenter, there was so much more that I just
Yeah.
totally overlooked. So that's a greater joy to me now. It's going back and finding things that I missed the first time
Yeah.
than like keeping up with all these sequels and remakes. That's where my
Well,
heart is.
one of the things for me about Freddy Krueger that I always had trouble with, and I think this is part of why it's not one of my favorite franchises, is we're expected to root for the bad guy. We're expected to, you know, root for Jason. We're kind of expected, as the sequels went on, to root for Michael Myers, at least, you know, by the second movie. Excuse me. But Freddy Krueger's a child molester. I had a hard time, even as a young, you know, teenager, watching these movies. I always question him, like, why couldn't they've just made him a child killer? Somehow that's better or less awful. You know, at least if he's just a killer, that's okay. But now he's a molester, and it's like, and we're supposed to buy Freddy plush toys and all this merchandise and stuff. Am I making
Yeah.
sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they also skirted around saying for sure that he molested them. You know, they heavily implied it, but they never said like that he raped them or whatever. And they never really
Right.
defined what was he doing with the glove. Was he like chopping them into pieces and leaving them in a dumpster, or just scaring them with it? Or
Are you talking about the original or the remake?
Any of them really. They didn't
any,
really.
any
They've been
am I
very
wrong?
vague.
Did they say for sure?
I think in the original they said it, right?
No, they just
No.
said he was doing
Yeah.
something and that he had like kidnapped and killed a couple of kids, and they like could, and all the parents were like, sure, it was this guy, and
Yeah.
he escaped the justice system, and then they took matters into their own hands. I like that also because it's not, you know, Michael Myers or Jason where pretty much everybody but Jason is like relatively innocent, more or less. Like the parents were vigilantes. They killed him on their own accord. They're not exactly guilt free. Now we identify with it. We are all in favor of that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a point that they're not guilt free, and it's almost it's this very very catch 22 where Freddy is created because of the fact that he was killed like that. He didn't serve any time. He was just burnt to death and came back to haunt them and is continuing his work. So it's very scary to me. I think that's what makes Freddy so much worse than Jason. Like, don't get me wrong, I like Jason and Michael, but Freddy is so he gives me the chills. So when you see him doing his thing, and the other thing I hate that I love to hate is that he gets away with a lot of it. He doesn't, there's no, even eventually Jason meets the authorities at some point, you know what I mean? And it's the supernatural that saves him. Michael Myers does get kidnapped and stopped, captured and stopped and killed in numerous times. That doesn't happen to Freddy. He has to be stopped by the people who figure out he's even there. I love that. I love the level of detective work where we're all sitting here like, okay, we all know how Freddy works. They need to figure it out now.
Right.
I
And
like
the
that.
concept of the dream reality being this other dimensional kind of place, like it's not just pictures in your head when you're sleeping, it's actually a place, you know, as a landscape for these movies, for things to play out. I really like that aspect of the films.
That's a Lovecraftian idea. Lovecraft
Yeah.
had a lot of ideas about the dreamlands and stuff, and like like the cats that would show up in the dreamlands. So I agree with you. I think that's a very like touched on point that I think New Nightmare also kind of had this weird establishment of like the line between reality and dream became very blurred. So there's a variety of horror, I think, in Freddy, because there's this realism of like you don't want anybody to actually ever do that stuff to somebody, but then the sleep paralysis stuff, and then this like cosmic dealing that he is a more powerful being than us, but he's limited to the dream world.
Right.
What
right.
movie was it where they introduced the idea of him absorbing the souls of the children that he killed, and that was giving him strength?
I think that was
The Dream Child.
Was it Dream Child?
Yeah.
And then that was like a new idea that was thrown in, but yeah.
I remember in one of the sequels too, where they said they had always said, well, Freddy Krueger was the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs, and there was
Yeah.
like some nun in an insane asylum
Yeah.
somehow got in there, and they all like raped her or whatever.
Gang
And
raped her, yeah.
but Robert Englund is one of the dudes. I love that.
Interesting Freudian concept.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a picture of that in Fangoria magazine. All right, so guys, we had an awesome discussion. Let's just go around the table. Mike, you're the newcomer. Why don't you tell us which one of these three franchises is your favorite and why?
I've got a, even though I love all three to some degree, I just love Freddy. I've seen more of Freddy's movies. I had Freddy Krueger posters on my wall when I was in high school. I mean, I was obsessed. My dad helped me make like a glove for Halloween once out of actual metal. Like he was down, we were in the basement, like welding it together. It's like, I was a little sick. But to me, it's the idea of Freddy rather than the series of movies themselves. It's like the first movie, like, and a little bit of the New Nightmare and how they just presented him as this, you know, he was just really scary. And then there was a lot of times when he wasn't scary, but I just love him. So that's my guy.
Cool. Bill?
It's hard to pick a favorite because I'm not really invested in any of these franchises. I'm a big fan of the original films in each one, but then I just sort of lose track. I think the one that I would be most invested in was Halloween, only because that was one of my favorite movies when I was very young, and I thought it was just the best thing ever. And Halloween 2 is going to be great, man. And no matter what the next movie was, it was going to be the best horror movie ever made.
Yeah.
And eventually I figured out, oh, no, it's not going to be. So I just kind of burned out on it. And I was like, okay, you got me all these times before. I didn't even see Halloween Kills. I've never seen it. I'm not interested in it. I'm not going to see Halloween Ends because there's one thing I already know. It's not going to end.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter what happens in that movie, it is not going to end until people are like, I don't want to see another Halloween movie ever again.
Right.
And that's everybody. Until that time comes, there will be more Halloween movies.
Right.
Spence?
I think Freddy is the most fun to watch. But if I had to pick a franchise to stick with, I think Friday the 13th is kind of the strongest because when it comes to just consistency of killer and like consistency of movie, I think they had a lot of variety, but it wasn't too ballparky. I thought it was very much within their own realm, and they stuck to it for most of it. The later movies kind of got a little crazy, but in every movie you get an enjoyable moment of Jason goes and stalks some poor teenager and kills them, and then at some point they stop him, and I really enjoy that. So I think Freddy is my favorite one to watch, and I think Friday the 13th is the strongest franchise. But I do think that the first Halloween is maybe one of the best movies out of all of them. I really think so, because that's a very, very well-made, well-paced, very creepy movie, and it's kind of timeless in a way. That is always going to be scary because the kills are so sudden and so out of the blue, and the lack of explanation makes it so much worse, in my opinion.
Honest question, Spency. What do you mean when you say ballparky?
Like Friday the 13th is very consistent in what it has happened. It's Jason. Okay, he gets reanimated in the sixth one, but save part 9, like that's the only one that really is too crazy, because part 7 with the psychic girl, it's a different character. Jason stays the same. Jason is a very consistent threat throughout the first one. Friday the 13th one is its own really, special brand of awesome. But
Yeah.
Jason's a very consistent character, and what makes him scary is that he keeps coming back. So I think that the franchise has the most consistency in that
So
sense.
you're saying like all the stories stayed within the same ballpark of
Yeah,
what
that's what I mean. Because Halloween is plagued by remakes and timeline changes. Like they had 1 and 2, and then they had 1, 2, 3. Not 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, 1, 2, and 4, 5, and 6, and then they scrapped that for H2O, and then they scrapped that for a remake with Rob Zombie, and then they scrapped all that to have. Now we've got the original and just John Carpenter's next movie. So I think Halloween is plagued with a few issues like that Friday the 13th just doesn't have as much. And I like continuity. I like when you see in part 4, Jason's got the mask, he's got the axe mark right there, and you see that he's got like slashes on his face from being hit by Tommy and stuff like that. And I love that kind of consistency. I think that's really cool. So I like continuity.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say, I mean, I agree with a lot of points you guys said about all 3 franchises. I think the originals of all of them are the best, and Halloween is probably the chief among those. I think Halloween is the king of those original movies for so many reasons. It's creativity, it's subtlety, being able to scare you without showing you too much. But I'm gonna have to go with Friday the 13th as well, for a lot of the reasons that you said, Spence. Is that it's a little bit more consistent in its continuity than the other 2 franchises. And I already said a few things that sort of made me not necessarily like, don't get me wrong, I like Nightmare on Elm Street. I love the first movie, and I like Freddy Krueger as a character, but there was a lot of things for me, especially just growing up watching these movies, that detracted. Whereas seeing the first 4, actually I've seen all the Friday the 13th in the movies, but the first 4 as a kid, that really, those are fond memories, and they scared the shit out of me. They still do, and I love it. There's just something about him in those first 4 movies and part 6 that I really like. I mean, part 6 has a like the first 4 all sort of have this similar gritty tone to them. Maybe 4 less so than the other 3, but part 6, it's got this slick kind of 80s look about it, which is, it's fine. It just changes the mood of the film. But yeah, I think Friday the 13th for me has had less letdowns in the sequels, even though there are quite a few, than the other franchises. So all right, well, we're gonna wrap it up.
Yardstick to measure them by.
Oh,
How many times did they disappoint you?
Yeah, they disappointed me less than the other ones. Well, I'm glad you guys could join us today. Thank you, Spency. Welcome to the show, Mike. Glad you could be with us. So Bill, can you give out your contact info?
Yeah, just check out driveinasylum.com. That has most of my, you can find all of my social media, the link to the Etsy shop if you want to purchase the most recent issue of Fanzine Drive-In Asylum. It's our 1981 yearbook special. It's all about movies made in 1981, a golden year.
Silly question. Is there a hyphen in the name of the website, or is it all just letters?
No, it's all just letters, no hyphen. Thank you for asking that, though.
It's a good question. So, and I of course can be found at havenpodcasts.com with my 2 shows, the Then Is Now podcast and the East Meets the West. If you want to give us feedback, you can either comment below on Facebook or YouTube. You can still go back and comment on Facebook. I apologize, folks. I don't know why the feed on Facebook didn't work tonight. I'm going to have to work out these stupid kinks during the next week or so. But you can also email us at havenpodcasts@gmail.com. Also, if you want to be a guest on the show and maybe discuss a horror topic in depth, and you have a topic that we haven't done yet, we've only done 5 episodes, so there's plenty. Please private message us here at the Facebook Fright Lounge page, or you can email us again at havenpodcasts@gmail.com. And that's about it. Thank you, and join us again for our next episode. And I'm just gonna.
How often are the episodes? It's like 1 a month, or are they just kind of random?
1 a month. Hold on, I'm just gonna play the outro. So.
Almost. Ruby Doom. True lounge music. Yes.
Lounge music.
Little xylophone at the end. Ding, ding, ding.